Chapter 307. 2 days passed in a blink of an eye. It was a sunny morning. Holy woman Marina got up early, washed her face and rinsed her mouth, and then began her routine prayer. After breakfast, she let the servants carefully tidy up the room and trimmed the flowers and plants in the courtyard. Then she quietly waited at the door, waiting for the arrival of the 2 enthusiastic girls. Before long, a gorgeous rainbow came into view from afar, followed by a string of sweet laughter. The corners of Marina's mouth slightly curled up. Hearing that familiar voice would unconsciously make one's mood lighten up. The 9 regions girl Luli had such a magical charm. And beside Luli, Bai Shixian was always elegant and comfortable. Seeing her, the faint trace of uneasiness in Marina's heart also vanished. According to the request of Archbishop Rowan, Marina could not meet them again. However, Marina believed that things should always end well. After all, the 2 sides did not do anything wrong. Even if they could not meet again, they should at least say their goodbyes. And the time of the goodbyes should be one day. She would explain the doctrine of holy light for the last time, and then they would say their goodbyes. Marina calmly faced her heart and made a decision. Aunt Marina, we have clearly considered the last time's problem. When they met, Luli straightforwardly went straight to the point. However, Marina smiled and shook her head. Let's talk about that later. Today, we have to finish the rest of the doctrine. Finish it? The content is a bit intense. Bai Shixian was somewhat puzzled. Is there something wrong? Marina marveled at the other party's keenness, but she denied it. It's nothing. I just think that with your perception, you can learn faster. Okay. The teaching time passed by quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sun had already set, and the half-day's lesson had come to an end. Ah, today's harvest is so good. Luli stretched her body. Oh, that's right, about joining the church, Marina lightly interrupted. Before that, I also have something to tell you. However, before her voice fell, the frightened voice of the servant suddenly came from outside. You can't go in, the holy woman is now, get lost. The rough roar and the servant's painful groan came at the same time, which surprised Marina. Who dared to be so rude in the territory of the Dragon City Cathedral? Trespassing into the mansion of the holy woman was a serious provocation to the dignity of holy light religion. In the land of Bretonia, there should be no one with such big courage. A moment later, 7 or 8 people barged in. They all had different appearances and eerie auras. They all wore a uniform emblem on their chests, which was a golden lightning bolt. Inquisition? Marina's expression changed when she saw the emblem. How could it be the Inquisition? As the name implied, the Inquisition was the institution used by holy light religion to punish heresy. It was the elite force of the church, radical, powerful, and notorious. They were fanatics of holy light religion. In order to spread their faith, they excluded the dissidents and dared to kill anyone. The wars and bloodshed caused by them were uncountable. However, in Dragon City, perhaps due to the suppression of the Dragon City guards, the work of the Inquisitor has been low-key for many years, and Marina has very little contact with them. But he didn't expect them to suddenly appear in front of him at this time. What are you doing? Even if it's the Inquisition, you can't just break into my house at will, right? Marina didn't like to use her identity to oppress people, but seeing that the other party came with bad intention and even injured her servant, her face turned gloomy. The leader of the Inquisition team was a tall knight. Seeing the holy maiden of the church, he had to stop, but there was no respect in his expression. He lightly said, I have received a reliable report that the 2 women here are spies sent by the heretics of the 9 regions. They need to be investigated by the Inquisition immediately. Spies? Marina's eyes widened. That's ridiculous. They are Dragon City guards who have passed the strict assessment. How could you say they are spies? The Inquisition knight somewhat impatiently said, this is the decision made by the Chief Inquisitor. If Madam Holy Woman has any objection, just talk to the Chief Inquisitor. Marina angrily said, then let your Chief Inquisitor come and talk to me personally. You want to take away anyone from me? You guys are too lawless. Seeing that the Holy Woman was determined, the Inquisition Knight's complexion turned gloomy. After looking at Lu Li and Bai Shixian, he somewhat maliciously asked, so, you're protecting those two people? Marina didn't budge an inch. I can't let you take them away like this. Oh, I see. The knight nodded his head and then said to his companion behind him, it's confirmed that the Holy Woman is their accomplice, let's do it. You. Marina was shocked and angry at the same time. She immediately released a pale golden light shield, trying to keep the Inquisition team outside. Although she didn't know any fighting skills, as a holy woman, she had the ability of a high-order profession. Although this shield was hastily activated, its defense was in no way inferior to a thick city wall. Even a direct bombardment from a cannon would be difficult to shake it. However, the Inquisition Knight was not a mediocre person. While speaking, he pulled out a blood-red sword with monstrous killing intent and slashed it at the shield, making it totter. At the same time, the rest of the Inquisition team also took action. Before they set off, they had anticipated that there might be a conflict with the Holy Woman. Therefore, everything was prepared in advance. A Heaven's Wrath priest released a golden lightning. This highly targeted spell instantly broke the shield. Marina felt that the holy light in her mind instantly boiled and burned, which stimulated her 7 orifices to overflow with blood, rendering her unable to move. Taking advantage of this opportunity, 2 quick-moving inquisitors quickly stepped forward and restrained Lu Li and Bai Shixian. They tied them up with a golden chain and then summoned out a steel cage to lock the 2 of them inside. You guys, don't go too far. Marina reached out to wipe the blood from her face. The majestic power of holy light fell from the sky and poured into her body. The Inquisition Knight's complexion drastically changed. Holy light descent? You're risking your life, are you crazy? No matter how bad the Holy Woman was at fighting, she was, after all, a high-order profession. Thus, the power that she could erupt with was exceptionally amazing. Although the Inquisition team was good at fighting, they actually haven't crossed the threshold of high-order profession. At this time, they were awed by Marina's amazing power. And at this time, the gate of the house suddenly opened, revealing a curious and slightly frightened little head. Mom, what's going on outside? Marina's complexion changed. Irene, don't come out. The Inquisition Knight was slightly startled, and then grinned. Your Excellency Holy Woman, take back your magical ability. I think none of us want to see that happen, right? You use my daughter to threaten me? I don't want to threaten anyone. We're just here to follow orders. But please don't make it too difficult for us. Despicable and shameless. Marina's mouth overflowed with blood. That was the anger that broke her gums. Hee. The Inquisition Knight sneered. Yes, despicable and shameless. The glory belongs to the Holy Woman, but the despicable belongs to us. With that, the 2 Inquisition Knight took back the steel cage that held Lu Li and Bai Shixian, and the Inquisition team immediately withdrew. Before going out, the Inquisition Knight turned his head and jokingly said, Your Excellency Holy Woman, goodbye. Marina lowered her head, but ultimately, she didn't take that step. She couldn't let her daughter take the risk with her. However, deep in her heart, she wished that she could let her incompetent and cowardly self die. And at this time, there was only one person who could help her. I've already said that we don't want to meet again, but you didn't listen. What happened in the end? When he saw Marina's blood-stained face, Archbishop Rowan sighed deeply. Marina's eyes were red. They are innocent. Rowan said, Of course I know that. Otherwise, how could I tolerate them to enter the church so many times? Marina said, they trusted me, so they ran out of the barracks. If it weren't for me, they would have stayed in the barracks. Under the protection of Bedivere, they would never have been caught by the Inquisition. Rowan sighed. I know you blame yourself. You do have responsibility for this matter, but what can you do now? They have been caught, do you want to go to the Inquisition to save them? Marina said, if there's no better way, then that's the only way. I can't just let it go. Absurd. Rowan flew into a rage. You're already a grown man, don't be too capricious. What kind of place do you think the Inquisition is that you can go whenever you want? Marina suddenly smiled. Capricious? They are just two innocent children. To save innocent people, do you think I'm being capricious? This world is not as simple as black and white. Marina did not give in. But we are the Holy Light religion. The spokesperson of the Holy Light, if we can't even distinguish between black and white, what would the world become? Enough of these sophistry. I think you need to calm down, so go to the quiet room and be quiet for a while. The Archbishop waved his hand and opened a dark portal, which directly sucked Marina in. Come back to me after you've calmed down. Behind the portal was a dark, narrow room with no sound or light. It was a quiet room located hundreds of meters below the ground of the cathedral. It was the place where the priests used to calm down when they were upset. In the quiet room, there was only absolute silence, which could allow people to see their own heart more clearly. After being teleported here by the Archbishop, Marina's body trembled as she felt the damp and cold air. Her heated mind also cooled down. Well, when she thought about it, the Archbishop's words were actually right. Although Luli and Bai Shixian were innocent, the Inquisition had already taken them away, so what else could she do? Break into the Inquisition? That would only make the situation more passive. A mature person should know how to accept reality. Before the result came, she could try infinitely, but when the result came, she must learn to accept it. Unfortunately, she was probably doomed to be unable to mature. From the time the Archbishop granted her the Holy Woman emblem, from the time she vowed to use her life to spread the holy light, rain or shine, she was doomed to not be as mature as other people. It was impossible to unscrupulously spread nonsense rumors, impossible to go against her heart for the so-called future, and even more impossible, to turn a blind eye to the injustice that happened before her eyes. I'm sorry, Archbishop Rowan, I may still let you down. Marina silently took out a ring from the inner pocket of her clothes, which was a gift from Bedivere a long time ago. An incomparably precious transmission ring. As long as she stimulated the spell on the ring, she could teleport to the other side in an instant. Unfortunately, the relationship between the two soon broke down, and after that, she never used it again. Now, let me borrow your power. The woman rubbed the surface of the ring, and the next moment, a strange fluctuation spread out. The space distorted, and then Marina's figure disappeared. At the same time, in the Inquisition's prison. Sister Bai, I feel so bored. Luli looked at the shackles on her hands and feet. Senior brother told us to pretend to be caught, but how long do we have to pretend? I'm already hungry, Bai Shixian faintly smiled. Even though she was in a cage, her calm temperament didn't change. Senior brother said that soon, someone will come to rescue us. When the time comes, we just have to rush out. You just have to be patient. Lu Li's shoulders drooped down. Can't I save myself? With that, the secret seal shackles on her wrists broke, revealing an unusually smooth surface. Bai Shixian smiled and shook her head. Lu Li pitifully looked at her. But I'm so hungry. Bai Shixian sighed, shook her head, and said, sure enough, senior brother is right, you're impatient. Here, this is for you. With that, the shackles on Bai Shixian's wrists naturally fell off, and then there was an original chicken drumstick in her hand. Senior brother said, "If you can persist until you reach the Inquisition's prison before complaining, he will reward you with a drumstick. Please bear with it." "Oh, then there's no problem." Chapter 308. When night fell, the area to the east of Dragon City was peaceful, forming a stark contrast with the bustling and noisy sleepless district at the center of the city. This area once belonged to the dozens of religious forces in Bretonia, but now it was basically monopolized by holy light religion. A faint holy light shrouded the holy area, expelling the night and bringing peace. Tap, tap, between two rows of thick and heavy religious buildings, a woman's figure appeared extremely small. The woman walked lightly on the bright and clean milky white stone path. Every step she took made a firm sound, disturbing the peace of the night. The woman was tall and slender, and her plain holy robe could hardly conceal her voluptuous curves. Her wavy brown hair hung in front of her chest, and her bright red lips were particularly eye-catching under the night sky. The faint holy light on both sides of the path gathered together as the woman walked, as if she was born with an affinity. The woman seemed to be draped in a layer of platinum gauze, revealing a pure and holy temperament. She went straight to the corner of the cathedral, in front of a gray-black fortress. It was one of the few places in the entire cathedral that was not shrouded by the holy light. It was also one of the most prestigious institutions of the holy light religion, the Inquisition for heresy. In fact, most of the powerful religions in the Western continent have similar arbitration organizations, but none of them could be as notorious as the Inquisition of heresy. Although she was the saintess of the church and could barely be included in the top management of the parish church, she did not have much contact with the Inquisition. This time, she did not have enough confidence. However, considering her mission, the woman still took a deep breath and knocked on the heavy wooden door. "I'm Marina, the saintess of Dragon City Parish. I want to see the chief judge." The woman stabilized her breathing and made her request. After a long time, the wooden door slowly opened, revealing endless darkness. In the darkness, a few pairs of red eyes stared at her. Even though she had been promoted to a high-grade profession, Marina still felt uncomfortable being stared at by the night judge of the Inquisition. "Lead the way." The Inquisitor responded silently, and the red light gradually disappeared into the darkness. Marina quickly followed, and her figure gradually disappeared into the darkness. After walking for an unknown distance in the darkness, a spot of light suddenly appeared in her field of vision. Marina adjusted her eyes to adapt to the sudden light. However, he discovered that it was a candlestick, and beside it sat an old man who looked like he had one foot in the grave. Marina's heart tensed up. She recognized the ordinary-looking old man as Count Conrad, the chief inquisitor of Dragon City Parish. He used to be a famous great aristocrat in the territory of Bretonia. When he was young, he lost his true love due to an accident. After that, he threw himself into the embrace of the holy light and gradually grew to become the regional chief inquisitor. Count Conrad was a truly ruthless person. He was even more powerful than Archbishop Rowan. However, in recent years, he was already old and did not care much about anything. He seemed to have been sent to Dragon City's adjudicator's office for retirement, but only when he faced this old man did he sense that he still had a great amount of vitality in his body. "Did you come for the 2 Dragon City guards?" Count Conrad sat next to the candlestick with his body hunched. He flipped through a thick dossier in his hand and asked without raising his head. Marina forced herself to muster up her courage. "Yes, I came for them. They are innocent. They are definitely not spies." "What guarantee do you have?" asked Count Conrad. "I guarantee it with my reputation." "Oh, with your reputation?" Count Conrad unhurriedly said, "The reputation of the parish's saintess has some weight now." Marina saw that things seemed to have taken a turn for the better. "Then, can you please let those 2 people go?" "Let them go?" Count Conrad closed the dossier, raised his eyes and glanced at Marina, and then said, "You saintesses are really stupid and ignorant. In addition to the bright appearance, the inside is rotten from beginning to end. It's empty, just like an entertainer, fooling the ignorant people under the sun. The real world cannot tolerate you idiots." Listening to Conrad's unusually vicious and sharp words, Marina's heart was surprisingly calm. "In short, can you please let them go?" "No, they are important suspects." Conrad coldly refused. "I let you in because this old man wanted to see with my own eyes how stupid the current saintess has become. Now that I have seen it, you can go." "Count Conrad. Not willing? You think I'm bullying you? Very well, then I'll make an exception and say a few more words. This time, although the report against those two Nine Regions people is anonymous, it's very strong. There is enough evidence to prove that they are inextricably linked to the Nine Regions people who attacked the Eastern Church some time ago. But that's not enough to prove that they are spies. I can prove it to you." Conrad said, "Perhaps, but I don't care whether they are spies or not. Therefore, even if you really prove something, I don't care. What I care about is the identity of Dragon City Guard." "The identity of Dragon City Guard?" "For so many years, Bedivere has managed Dragon City Guard like a subway bucket. Rowan is old and has no initiative, so he has never been able to break through the situation. Then let's take this opportunity to let the Inquisitor push him. Dragon City Guard colluded with the Nine Regions heretics. This reason should be enough for the Church to take further action. But this is a lie." "Perhaps, but who cares? As long as my men interrogate them, they'll say anything." Count Conrad lightly said, "Therefore, I should thank you. If you didn't lead those two people to the church, it would be very difficult for us to make our move. Bedivere's people rarely enter the church, and it was you who gained their trust." Marina felt dizzy. Was this really the doing of the Holy Light believers? Wouldn't this kind of vicious action attract the sanction of the Holy Light? Even though the Inquisitor had been notorious for a long time, Marina always thought that it was just an occasional extreme action of a few fanatics. Unexpectedly, the darkness here has broken through her imagination. Now, those two women should be being tortured. I don't know how long they can hold on, 1 day, 2 days. Holy Maiden, you should go back and quietly wait for the good news. The news that Dragon City Guard colluded with the Nine Regions heretics will soon spread throughout Bretonnia." Count Conrad sneered and reached out to extinguish the candle, wanting to plunge everything into darkness. "In your dreams." Along with a loud roar, a dazzling brilliance bloomed in the darkness. A silver sword light pierced straight at Count Conrad. The swift and fierce sword aura caused the Count's expression to change. He immediately lifted the cloak behind him and wrapped the long sword with a ball of shadow. In an instant, the shadow was cut into pieces by the sword wind, and the Count took this opportunity to teleport to the distance. The Inquisitor was the Count's territory, and every bit of darkness was his help. Here, the Count was omnipotent. However, the next moment, a huge golden fireball suddenly burned, expelling all the surrounding darkness. In a spacious stone room, several embarrassed inquisitors clustered around Count Conrad. They were surprised by this sudden change and the exposure of their whereabouts. "It can expel the eternal night enchantment, is this dragon fire?" Conrad squinted his eyes and took in the golden fireball into his field of vision. Then, he was shocked. "Bedivere. How did you come in? When did you come in?" "Humph." Bedivere shook his head, angrily snorted, and then quietly threw an abandoned ring wreckage into the dragon fire, making it burn even more fiercely. "You dare to make a move on my people, yet you didn't think that I would come? Dragon City is my territory. In here, there is no place that I can't enter. As for when..." While speaking, Bedivere's eyes turned to Marina. "When you thank her for her assistance." Marina's whole body was cold, as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Bedivere, you misunderstood. Over the years, I have indeed misunderstood a lot. Bedivere coldly retracted his eyes and no longer paid attention to Marina. Conrad grinned. What an unexpected appearance. Unfortunately, you're brave but not astute. Since you've come today, don't be in a hurry to leave. While laughing, the chief inquisitor turned into a thick shadow. The eternal night enchantment that was expelled by the dragon fire also quickly recovered, swallowing the surrounding area into darkness. As the chief inquisitor, even though Conrad was old, he still had the strength of an intermediate high-order warrior. Admittedly, he was inferior to Bedivere, but in this inquisition, there was a dragon trap array that targeted the dragon clan's bloodline. Once it was launched, the dragon clan's power would be suppressed to the lowest point. At that time, he had full confidence that he could behead the illustrious Dragon City Master. Ridiculous bug. With that, Bedivere suddenly threw away the dragon fire in his right hand and pulled out the long sword from his waist. Rows of mysterious inscriptions suddenly appeared on the heavy sword. Former king, grant me victory. Along with his firm prayer, the inscriptions on the sword body lit up the surrounding area as if it was daytime. Bedivere's imposing manner multiplied. It was a brand new power that was completely different from the dragon clan's bloodline. At the same time, Count Conrad was horrified. This is the power of the Night King, and you still have it. The next moment, the silver sword light, as if it was splitting the sky and the earth, swept out in all directions with endless power. When the sword wind stopped, starlight sprinkled down. This indestructible inquisition that was blessed by the holy light and sheltered by the shadow was torn into pieces by Bedivere's sword, leaving only broken tiles and debris. In the ruins, the groans of the injured inquisitors rose one after another. And in front of Bedivere, Count Conrad fell to the ground with a horrified expression. Just now, the sword wind brushed past his neck, which almost took his life. Bedivere somewhat wearily retrieved his sword. His eyes swept around and then he saw two familiar figures. Lu Li's beautiful eyes widened as she incredulously looked around. The girl was holding a chicken leg in her hand. Her cheeks were bulging as she chewed it with difficulty. Hot sun ninja nest, huh? Just now, she clearly felt a swift and fierce sword wind, but it cleverly avoided her and Little White. Then, the brick wall collapsed, and everything around them was shattered. However, she and Little White were safe and sound. Bai Shixian was also surprised. Is this the reinforcement that senior brother mentioned? Are we going to rush out now? Bedivere looked at the two people and scolded, why are you two in a daze? Quickly run. With that, he took a step forward and grabbed the two girls in his hand. Then, with a light tap of his foot, he soared into the sky. His figure turned into a dragon in midair and flew toward his castle. After an unknown amount of time, when the figure of the dragon completely disappeared into the night, in the ruins, a tall woman sat down on the ground. Her soft and beautiful face was miserable. From the beginning to the end, he didn't even look at her. How did things turn out like this? At the same time, a black-clothed young man, who was sneaking toward the direction of the Holy Church to save people, was stunned as he looked at the ruins of the Inquisition in the distance. Is that foodie Lu Li so hungry that she even ate the bricks as calcium tablets? Chapter 309. The news of the Dragon City Master personally raiding the Inquisition Hall to rescue the two recruits under his command did not spread. Whether it was Dragon City or Holy Light Religion, both deliberately suppressed the news. For Holy Light Religion, a parish Inquisition headquarters being overturned by a sword strike was not something worth boasting about. And for Bedivere, after many years of forbearance, it was actually not his intention to break out. In terms of strength, no matter how strong Dragon City was, it was not as strong as Holy Light Religion. This was a huge church that had influence all over the continent. If it became serious, it could easily crush Dragon City. At the very least, it had not reached the point where it could openly challenge it. However, no matter for either side, this brief calm was not the end. It was impossible to treat what had happened as if it never happened. The conflict between Dragon City and Holy Light religion that had been handled in a low-key manner for so many years was only a matter of time before it erupted. That's why they say that man proposes but God disposes. In Dragon City's barracks, Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Wang Lu was naturally the one who spread the rumors and made the adjudicator's office take action. He was also the only one who could provide the adjudicator with conclusive evidence that would allow them to break the balance they had maintained with Dragon City for many years. Of course, this behavior of betraying teammates was based on absolute safety. Not to mention that the real strength of Lu Li and Bai Shixian was far higher than their performance as Dragon City recruits, so there was no need to worry about self-preservation. On the other hand, as long as Wang Lu could pass the news to Bedivere in time, with Bedivere's wisdom, he would inevitably guess that the Inquisitor might use this point to make a big fuss. Thus, a surprise attack to save people was an inevitable choice. The worst-case scenario was that Bedivere would use the two of them as sacrificial pawns, and then Wang Lu would personally make his move, cooperating with Lu Li and Xiao Bai to escape. It was just that, even Wang Lu didn't expect that in the end, it would be Bedivere who personally made his move. And in the process of making his move, he happened to bump into Marina, which led to a huge misunderstanding. Does Bedivere really love his people like his own children? Wang Lu was deeply suspicious. They're just two new recruits, yet he dares to charge into the tiger's den himself. How did this hot-headed guy survive until today? Aya commented coldly, I used to do the same thing. So he didn't learn his lesson? Your country is about to perish. What a good counterexample. Aya, Wang Lu, it's immoral to casually poke people's wounds. In short, this is called dodging the first time, but not the 15th time. Wang Lu sighed. You see, I said at the beginning that I should seduce Marina and Irene to join our side, but you didn't agree. Now, with such a misunderstanding, Bedivere must hate Marina. Abandoning his wife and daughter was a sure thing. At that time, Madame Marina would feel deeply wronged and cry all day long. How could people bear to see her like this? After all, she is a kind woman, so I can only open my heart to comfort her and let her feel the warmth and firmness of a man again. You see, after going around in a circle, we are back to the starting point. If you dare to do that, I won't spare you. Aya threatened lightly. Their relationship as husband and wife is not that fragile. Wang Lu shrugged and said, all right, but in any case, I guess Marina's faith in the church should be fragmented, right? After seeing the true face of an interest organization, most of the idealists would not be able to withstand the reality. In this regard, Aya also agreed. Now she should deeply begin to doubt the nature of the church. I hope the next development can be smooth. Wang Lu said, rest assured, as the church's holy woman, she has no way to go after breaking off with the church. As long as Bedivere is willing to accept her, would she refuse? And as long as she brings her daughter to our side, we have no worries at all. Dragon City Cathedral, underground, in a dimly lit room with rough stone walls. Marina quietly knelt in front of a holy light statue, softly reciting the holy light prayer. The soft melody continued to echo in the stone room, creating a comfortable atmosphere. However, outside the stone room, there was a pair of big shining eyes full of worry, which seriously stared at Marina. Mom, it's been 3 days. Irene anxiously said to herself. Since that day, Marina returned to the church in a sorry state, and then came to the underground of the church, which was used for penance and punishment. Every prayer in the stone room would bring great pain to the spirit. For a weak-willed priest, after praying for a while, they would not be able to bear the pain and would either stop praying or simply faint. However, Marina persisted for 3 days and 3 nights. Her white robe had long been soaked with sweat, and her plump skin now showed a dry color. Her 2 dry lips were still rhythmically moving, but her breath of life was getting weaker and weaker. This was the repentance of burning her life. "Mom, it's enough," Irene said with a sobbing tone from outside the room. The little girl tried to move forward, but was resisted by an invisible force. Who will save Mom?" While speaking, Irene suddenly heard an old sigh, and then the restriction on the stone room's door was suddenly broken, and an old figure walked in. "Marina, it's enough." Archbishop Rowan's voice interrupted Marina's prayer. The woman opened her eyes and wanted to get up, but she couldn't help but sway. The old man stretched out his hand and placed it on the top of Marina's head. A gentle holy light enveloped her, quickly restoring her vitality and physical strength. Marina was not pretentious. After nodding her thanks, she stood up and said, "In these 3 days, I have been repenting and thinking." Rowan said, "Tell me, I'm listening." "Your Excellency, I want to ask you, in this matter, did I really do anything wrong?" The Archbishop looked at Marina with a complicated gaze and did not speak. Marina said, "For the past 3 days, I've been using the holy light to interrogate myself. What I've done has violated the will of the holy light and the teachings of the Church. But I haven't found the answer. The holy light is kindness, the holy light is universal love, the holy light is to distinguish right from wrong, not to compromise, not to distinguish black from white, and not to achieve the goal by any means necessary. I know that this world is far more complicated and cruel than I thought. We, the holy women of the Church, are often scolded for being ignorant of worldly affairs, like vases and mascots. But I think, perhaps this world has become complicated because there are too many people who are proficient in worldly affairs. If everyone can be ignorant of worldly affairs and treat others with sincerity, how can there be so many contradictions? I remember when I was in the monastery, one day, a team of inquisitors escorted a group of ragged barbarians through the monastery to stay for a night. In the evening, they showed off their martial arts to the nuns, saying that with only a dozen people, they destroyed a heretic tribe and killed until blood flowed like a river. At that time, the sisters were puzzled and asked them, "The holy light is benevolent, why do they have to kill so cruelly?" They laughed and then explained that there were many fools in this world who refused to accept the holy light and obstructed the spread of the holy light. If they could not be killed, there would be many people who would not be able to receive the holy light's illumination. In order to spread the holy light, moderate force is necessary. Now that I think about it, that's not right, right? Is the purpose of the holy light to spread itself? Can it do anything for the sake of the goal? Sometimes I even think, if there is only faith in the holy light in this world, and no church, would it be a little better? Marina said while looking at Archbishop Rowan in a daze. Her heart was restless. These were her heartfelt words, but they were also rebellious words. With these words alone, Rowan had enough reason to abolish her status as a holy woman. However, Rowan did not do so, but also confided in her, "Your doubts, in fact, I have also had them. These questions have troubled me for decades, until the end of my life, I barely found the answer. There is an insurmountable gap between faith and reality. We expect the world to be like the sea of holy light, with endless happiness, without the slightest bit of darkness. However, the reality is not like this. There are too many problems that need to be solved, which is not something that can be achieved by faith alone. The holy light may be omnipotent, but we are just ordinary mortals, and can only solve problems with mortal means. But, those means go against the will of the holy light? The will of the holy light was superior, ideal, and perfect. However, reality was incomplete, which was why there were so many differences between the will of holy light and the will of the holy light. Fish in the water are born to swim, but we humans need a long time to learn and train. during which, we are bound to make a lot of mistakes. Therefore, all of our efforts are for the sake of making this world perfect one day, and this process will inevitably be accompanied by contradictions and pain. We cannot be discouraged because of temporary setbacks, but we must firmly believe that tomorrow will be better than today, and then redouble our spirits to fight for a better future. Marina did not know what to say. Rowan's words, in fact, were obviously in conflict with the doctrine, but after listening to his words, the haze in her heart was dispelled a lot. "Thank you, Your Excellency. May the holy light be with you. Man proposes, but God disposes." Dragon City Archbishop Rowan, in any intelligence information, was a serious and rigid person who lacked change. He abided by the dogma all his life, and was equally strict with others and himself. So, no one expected that when Marina's faith in the church was on the verge of collapse, an archbishop would come forward and save Marina's faith. However, man proposes, but God disposes. Just as the Archbishop Rowan felt a little relieved, feeling that the storm had passed, a new storm began to brew in a distant place. It was a sea, a boundless platinum holy sea. The sea contained all the beauty and happiness of the world, the ultimate yearning of countless people. However, in the midst of the light, a dragon appeared. It was a giant dragon that was pitch black all over. Its body was abnormally huge, and when it spread its wings, it was like a dark cloud that covered the sky. Every scale on its body was like a city in the mortal world. Just looking at its figure would make people tremble in fear. Even compared to the incomparably vast holy sea, the giant dragon was not inferior. The black dragon flapped its wings, floating on the holy sea, and then, it opened its mouth and took a deep breath. Suddenly, the sea boiled, and the platinum energy crazily poured into the mouth of the black dragon, forming a huge whirlpool. The holy sea rapidly shrank, but the black dragon's appetite would never be satisfied. Moreover, as it continued to devour, it became bigger and bigger. Before long, the holy sea was sucked dry by the black dragon, and suddenly, the whole world fell into darkness. At the same time, in the holy city of Holy Light Religion, an old man in a golden red robe suddenly opened his eyes. Beads of cold sweat slid down from his forehead and covered his cheeks. Beside the old man, a slightly dull voice asked, "Holy One, what did you see?" The golden red robe Holy One was silent for a long time, and then said, "The World Annihilation Dragon is one step closer." World Annihilation Dragon? The person who asked the question seemed extremely confused. "Holy One, your World Annihilation Dragon Dreamland has lasted for more than 200 years. After 200 years, the once flourishing Breton dragon clan is no longer a threat. The only hidden danger that suddenly appeared was locked in the king's treasure house by me some time ago. The threat from the dragon should have been eradicated. Could it be that there are other dragon clan bloodlines in the continent? I can't figure out the mystery of it, but according to what I saw in my dream, the life and death enemy of my holy light religion must be the Breton dragon clan. After the Purification War, I haven't had a dream for a long time, but now that the World Annihilation Dragon has reappeared, it must mean a crisis. However, there are only two dragon clan remnants that can be called a threat. One is in Dragon City, which has lost its spirit, so there's no need to worry about it. The other one seems to have appeared out of nowhere, but has been trapped in the king's treasure house by me, with no possibility of escape. King's treasure house, are you sure it's foolproof? How could there be any mistake in the Golden King's inheritance? If you don't trust me, I'll take you to see it. Speaking of which, after so long, those several absurd heretical bastards should calm down a bit. While speaking, the scene changed. The Holy One's bedroom suddenly turned into a vast and desolate space, which was an independent space on the 5th floor of the Golden King's treasure house. However, as soon as the golden red robe Holy One came in, she heard a series of jaw-dropping sounds. "Ah, faster, don't stop. It's going to be born. Yes, junior sister. I can't believe that with this self-created 6 directions rapid birth method, it's actually possible to give birth in 3 months. In this way, it won't be long before we can go out. Senior brother, let's do it again. Boom. The space in front of them suddenly shattered. The golden red robe Holy One directly broke through the space and returned to her bedroom. This is what you want to show me? What the hell, Holy One, please don't misunderstand, I also didn't expect this. While speaking, the manager of the king's treasure house almost went crazy. Chapter 310. The shocking scene in the king's treasure house, even after a long time had passed, was still stimulating the saint's nerves. On the other side, the manager of the king's treasure vault also felt helpless. This time, it's my mistake. But Holy One, you've also seen it. All day long, they carry out obscenities, at least they won't run out to threaten holy light religion. The saint was still angry. Are you sure they can't get out? Don't forget, there's still a ghost lingering in the treasury. Don't worry. Even if he was once invincible, he's just a remnant soul now. I am the manager of the treasury. Since we can get rid of this factor, we should hurry up and get rid of the remnants of Dragon City. Now? The administrator was slightly surprised. But the strength of the Dragon City parish isn't enough, right? So let Faceless go. Saint coldly made his decision. Faceless One? Are you thinking of? As servants of the Holy Light, we have the obligation to eliminate all obstacles and threats at all costs. Moreover, Bedivere has lived for so long, that's enough. Sparing him and his Dragon City in the purification battle is already a great blessing. Yes. By the way, there are rumors that the eastern city-states have officially formed an alliance with the eastern heretics. Alliance? It was just the wishful thinking of a few people. Using a few nails and killing a few people, the alliance would collapse on its own. Allying with foreigners won't end well. Yes. The conversation between the two continued. Under the holy light, darkness was eternal. Under the unremitting efforts of the Archbishop of Dragon City Parish, Rowan, the matter of Bedivere's raid on the Inquisitor gradually faded away. The relationship between the Church and Dragon City had become gentle, as if they had returned to the silent tacit understanding of the past few years. No one was to interfere with the other, and no one was to disturb the other. According to the previous agreement, everyone was to perform their own duties and do their own thing. During this period, Archbishop Rowan took great credit. He was the first to control the situation, so that the leaderless Inquisition would not intensify the contradictions. He was also the one who appeased Marina and stabilized the faith of the Holy Maiden. He even secretly met with Bedivere that very night to stabilize Dragon City's action. The series of methods displayed the old man's shrewd and ruthless methods. At the same time, it also forced a certain someone, who had single-handedly stirred up a series of conflicts, to change his plan and make new plans. However, no one expected that a new storm would descend on Dragon City faster than anyone could have predicted. The new chief judge? In the Dragon City Cathedral, Marina was surprised by this rumor. Archbishop Rowan nodded. I just received instructions from the Holy City yesterday. Because Count Donald is seriously injured and cannot manage the affairs, the new Chief Inquisitor will probably take office in 2 or 3 days. As he spoke, the Archbishop looked deeply worried. Marina asked, who is the new chief referee? Rumor has it that he is Faceless One. Faceless One. Marina suddenly stood up. It turned out to be that madman. What were the people of the sacred city thinking? The situation here has just stabilized, and they actually sent that executioner, that homicidal maniac? The Archbishop gave Marina a long look. Obviously, this naive saintess didn't realize that the Holy City sent Faceless One to intensify the conflict. Her previous series of means to stabilize the situation might have also offended the Holy City. Your Excellency Archbishop, I really don't understand. Faceless One has just committed a heinous crime in the West a few years ago. Why didn't the church punish him? Shouldn't such a person be expelled? Try to adapt. The Archbishop was also helpless. Faceless One is admittedly radical, but when it comes to the holy light belief, he is not inferior to you and me, and even above you and me. He is the Church's most powerful person, second only to the great legend. Moreover, his ability to do things is very strong, and he is the Church's sharpest knife. For him, even if you don't understand, you have to be patient. But, before her voice fell, suddenly, a joyful voice came from behind them. Oh, well said. Unexpectedly, in this heresy-ravaged land, we actually met a confidant. It seems like we can still cooperate. Who is it? Marina and Rowan turned around at the same time and saw a tall and thin man, dressed in a pure white robe, standing upright in the middle of the room. At first glance, he looked solemn and serene, like a template of a holy clergyman. However, his face seemed to have been forcibly erased by some force. There were no facial features, only pure white. Faceless One? Rowan was horrified and subconsciously took 2 steps back. When did you do that? Faceless One's figure flashed and appeared behind Rowan. He stretched out his white-gloved hand and put it on Rowan's shoulder, and then made a seemingly intimate gesture. When I was in the Holy City, I heard people talking about you. They said that you're the biggest good-for-nothing among the more than 30 Holy Light religion diocesan bishops, and that you've lived your life like a dog. Now it seems that although you're good-for-nothing, you're also tactful. Rowan's face turned red, and his withered hands clenched tightly, but he resisted the urge to speak. However, Marina, who has always regarded Rowan as a father, could not help but speak. Sir Faceless One, you're too rude. Courtesy? Faceless One said, the will of the Holy Light is the greatest courtesy, and I am here on the will of the Holy Light. With that, Faceless One turned his head. His pale and flat face seemed to shoot out a frightening gaze. Oh, you're the holy woman of this diocese, Marina? I've heard about you in the Holy City. People say that you're a filthy whore. Now that I've met you, I find that they're right. Filthy. Marina couldn't believe her ears. Not convinced? When you gave birth to that heresy Bedivier's bastard, every corner of your body, from the inside to the outside, has been rotten. What's even more ridiculous is that I heard that not only you didn't kill that little bastard, you actually raised her until today. With that, Faceless One suddenly clapped his hands. That's right, since you mentioned it, where is that little bastard? This time, I'll just clean her up. You're courting death. Marina's anger could no longer be contained. If the other party was targeting her or even Rowan, she could force herself to shut up. However, her daughter, Irene, was undoubtedly her reverse scale. Although the holy woman was not good at fighting, she was, after all, a high-order profession. The violent holy light turned into a raging flame and recklessly broke out. In a twinkling of an eye, it was like a scorching sun, wanting to plunge herself and the entire dragon city into a sea of fire. Humph. In this regard, Faceless One just stretched out his hand. The flame was suddenly bound by an invisible force and then pressed back into Marina's body, unable to leak even the slightest bit. Marina's tender body trembled. Her internal organs were burned by this powerful shock, and she vomited blood on the spot. Ah, you actually dare to attack the messenger of the Holy Light. Sure enough, you're 100% heresy whore. Wumian's easily suppressed Marina's outburst. It seems like it's really necessary to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Let me see where that little bastard is. Marina tremblingly shouted, if you have any means, come at me, don't hurt the child. Rowan also advised, Sir Faceless One, Marina was just impulsive, please don't be magnanimous. She is a firm believer. Initially, because she was young and inexperienced, she was seduced by the Dragon City Master and accidentally made a mistake. Now, she wholeheartedly yearns for the holy light, and has long had nothing to do with heresy. But, when people make a mistake, they have to pay the price. Faceless One raised his hand with interest and turned his pale face to Rowan, seemingly waiting for him to continue. Rowan looked at the seriously injured and weary Marina, gritting his teeth and said, "Moreover, Marina is, after all, the parish's holy woman. Her prestige here is very high. If you kill her at will, it would be very detrimental to the local preaching." Faceless One said, "Are you threatening me?" "Absolutely not. I'm just stating the facts." Upon hearing this, Faceless One nodded. "What you said is very reasonable. It's indeed not good to casually kill a prestigious holy woman. Moreover, the real enemy of Holy Light religion is Breton Dragon Clan, so I don't need to waste my energy on a small fry." With that, Faceless One retracted his right hand that was suppressing Marina. Marina felt that her whole body was relaxed. The pressure has been lifted, but she couldn't use even the slightest bit of strength, which was very uncomfortable. In Rowan's heart, a boulder fell to the ground. It seemed like this Faceless One just wanted to give them a show of strength. As the new Chief Inquisitor, he quickly established absolute prestige in this place. Sure enough, he was worthy to be the Church's sharpest knife. His style of conduct was too radical. Fortunately, the most difficult hurdle should be over. However, just as Rowan relaxed, he suddenly heard Faceless One say something. "The death penalty can be avoided, but the punishment cannot be avoided." With that, his right hand's 5 fingers clenched and then released. With a tearing sound, Marina's holy robe was unexpectedly split into 2 by an invisible force, revealing the soft and plump naked body under the holy robe. "You!" Marina was ashamed and angry, but she was powerless to struggle. She reluctantly reached out to cover her private place, which made her posture extremely embarrassing. "You said that you have nothing to do with Bedivere, but if I do it with you here, would Bedivere have no reaction?" "I doubt it." Rowan angrily said, "Sir Faceless One, what are you doing? Can't you see it? I'm going to rape this woman, and then lure Bedivere out and let him walk into the trap. I heard that because 2 of his recruits were arrested, he dared to raid the Inquisitor's office. Since his woman is being raped, there's no reason for him not to help. Then, I'll wait for him to come." With that, his figure flashed and appeared in front of Marina. His tall and slender body pressed down, shrouding Marina like a dark cloud. "Stay away from me, you devil." "Devil? Wrong, I'm the Chief Inquisitor of this parish, the embodiment of the will of Holy Light." Faceless One still had that cold tone. While saying that, he undeniably reached out to pry open Marina's closed legs, and a shadow slowly came out from his white robe. Archbishop Rowan finally could not hold back. Such brutality is definitely not the will of Holy Light. His platinum scepter was pointed forward, and an irresistible dividing force bloomed between Faceless One and Marina. In the legend of Holy Light religion, this was the supreme divine technique that the prophet once used to divide the sea. Now, Rowan used a simplified version of it, but its power still could not be underestimated. If it hit a person, it could even directly tear an intermediate high-order profession. However, in response to this, Faceless One just stretched out his left hand and made a grasping motion in the air, and Rowan's scepter was smashed to pieces. His chest seemed to have been smashed by a giant hammer, caved in, and spurted out blood. Holy Light really didn't let me do that." Faceless One nodded. But, it didn't say anything against it. With that, his figure moved forward, and the shadow was about to run through Marina. The woman was humiliated and turned her head away, powerless to resist what was happening in front of her. However, at this time, knock, knock, knock. A sudden knock on the door disrupted everyone's rhythm. "Hello, I'm the water station's water delivery, is anyone there?" Chapter 3:11. Water station to deliver water? Hearing the abrupt young voice outside the door, Faceless One was slightly startled. In his perception, there was indeed a young man in a windproof cloak standing outside the door, carrying a huge heavy bucket on his shoulder. However, this was not surprising. As the largest city in Bretonia, Dragon City's supporting facilities were far from comparable to other cities. There was a special water station in the city, where the ice water from the plateau north of Dragon City was fetched and delivered to the door for the city's rich and powerful to drink. And the Archbishop and Holy Woman of Holy Light Religion naturally had enough financial resources to enjoy the water delivery service. Humph, a small fish that delivers itself to the door. Faceless One's attention was attracted by the water worker outside the door, so he temporarily let go of Marina. He stood up and was ready to clean up the water worker. However, after a moment of thought, he changed his mind. Because he suddenly found out that the scene inside the room seemed quite unique. The Archbishop and Holy Woman of Dragon City, who had always been close to each other, were disheveled. The Holy Woman was lying naked in the Archbishop's private room. If this scene was seen by outsiders and spread out, it would be very interesting. After all, his purpose of coming here was not to target small characters like Marina and Rowan. Whether it was rape or not, all the means were for Bedivere. And to ruin the reputation of these two people was undoubtedly more beneficial to his own plan. Very well, I'll let this small fish take advantage of me. Faceless One nodded slightly and then his figure flashed away. At the same time, the blood on Marina and Archbishop Rowan also disappeared. Rowan's body involuntarily soared into the air. His holy robe was torn apart in mid-air, and then he fell naked on Marina's body. The two of them were put in a rather awkward posture, and both of them were sore and weak, unable to move. "Sorry, Marina, Archbishop Rowan was so embarrassed that he might as well die. Marina also didn't know what to do. At this time, the wooden door of the room was finally pushed open, and a young boy carrying a huge bucket came in. "Your Excellency Archbishop, I'm here to deliver water." "Wow, this is really a feast for the eyes." Marina was ashamed and indignant. She struggled to shout, "You, put down the water and get out." "Get out? If I go out now, do you want me to leave you behind to give Faceless One a child?" As the water delivery man spoke, he took off his hood, revealing a face unique to Asians. There was a faint, confident smile on his face. Marina was shocked. "Who are you?" "Ms. Marina, nice to meet you. I'm Wang Lu. Previously, thank you for taking care of my junior sister Lu Li and junior sister Bai Shixian." "Wang Lu?" Muttering this slightly awkward pronunciation, Marina's heart moved. "Are you also a Dragon City guard?" "Oh, sort of." Marina sighed. Although she was still embarrassed, her heart relaxed. Since they were from Dragon City, at least the worst situation wouldn't happen. "You are," Wang Lu stuck out his index finger. "Don't talk. We're leaving." With that, he opened the barrel on his shoulder, revealing a dark whirlpool. Marina and Archbishop Rowan were irresistibly sucked into the whirlpool, and then silently disappeared. Wang Lu resealed the barrel and put on his hood, resuming his role as a water delivery man. He paused for a moment and then shouted, "Sorry, I didn't mean to see it." "No, I didn't see anything. Goodbye, madam." Then he awkwardly rushed out of the room, carrying the heavy barrel, and ran out of the church. In the sky above the church, Faceless One somewhat doubtfully perceived the distant water delivery man, and a slightly strange feeling welled up in his heart. The next moment, his figure flashed back to Archbishop Rowan's room, and he saw that the two people who were previously restrained by him had disappeared. Faceless One sneered. Hee hee, sure enough, someone came to rescue us. Is it Dragon City? Well, it can only be Dragon City. This move is really beautiful, beyond my expectation. It's worth praising. The next moment, his tone became extremely cold. Humph, a God-given opportunity, I'll kindly accept it. At the same time, Wang Lu, who was carrying the bucket and running away, also laughed. This is a God-given opportunity. After returning to Dragon City Barracks, Wang Lu went straight to his bedroom and put down the bucket. When the bucket was opened, Archbishop Rowan and Holy Maiden Marina, dressed in civilian clothes, came out. The bucket was modified from a mustard seed bag by Wang Lu, which had already been filled with clothes. When Marina came out, she anxiously said, "Irene, Wang Lu smiled. Don't worry, she's one of the first ones that I rescued. Right now, she's playing a game with Luli in the next room." Marina was startled, but then she heard her daughter's laughter coming from the side. The only and biggest worry in her heart immediately vanished. The ups and downs of her mood made her feel tired, dizzy, and unstable. "Madam, please sit down, Bishop as well." Wang Lu reached out his hand, and the two chairs in the bedroom automatically moved behind the two of them. After sitting down, Archbishop Rowan asked in a sinking voice, "Where is Bedivere?" In his view, this daring rescue operation was naturally Bedivere's doing. The appearance of Faceless One was too sudden, without any warning. Even the local Holy Light religion was not prepared. In this city, only Bedivere could rush to the rescue. Who would have thought that? Wang Lu shook his head. "I didn't follow Bedivere's order to save people. Bedivere doesn't know what just happened." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Then whose order did you follow?" Wang Lu pointed outside the door. "Her." While speaking, the door opened, and a blonde girl slowly walked in. It was Aya. Wang Lu said with a smile, "It's really scary. A few hours ago, we were playing cards when suddenly a bunch of hair popped up on this girl's head. I just teased her about her hair erection, but her face suddenly changed, saying that a powerful enemy is coming. Then she sent me to save people. I didn't expect that I would actually save you too. Let her talk about the specific principle, I'm just following orders, ha ha ha." After explaining, Wang Lu gave his seat to Aya. Who knew that Archbishop Rowan suddenly stood up from his seat? His stooped body trembled violently, and 2 lines of tears fell down his cheeks. "Madam Holy Maiden, Madam Holy Maiden. Is that you?" Rowan's old tears flowed down as he knelt down in front of Aya. Unexpectedly, I can see you again. Holy Light is merciful, Holy Light is merciful." Aya was surprised. You. I'm not a holy maiden." Rowan insisted, "I will never mistake you. Madam Jean, you are Madam Jean." While crying, he knelt in front of Aya and refused to get up. Aya blankly looked at Wang Lu. Wang Lu thought for a moment, and then reached out his hand in front of his neck, indicating to kill this old fool. Aya glared at him, but Wang Lu turned his eyes away. "Excuse me, what is this?" Aya had to turn to Marina for help, and Marina also looked at Aya in surprise. "Sure enough, it's the same. It's exactly the same." Marina exclaimed, and then explained in a low voice, 80 years ago, in the western part of the continent, there was a girl who led people to rebel against a fallen bishop. The bishop colluded with the devil and had monstrous power, but that girl crushed all the fallen with her divine power. However, in the end, because the church's high level was deceived by the bishop, they sent a legendary level powerhouse to kill her. Later, the truth came to light, and the church regretted it too late. Although she was posthumously awarded the title of Supreme Holy Maiden, unfortunately, the dead cannot be resurrected. Her portrait has been circulated among the church's high level, and it's exactly the same as you. And Archbishop Rowan was once a person of the holy light that she saved. Aya could not help but laugh. 80 years ago, she was already in 9 regions. The great achievement of leading people to rebel against the fallen bishop certainly did not belong to her. However, a girl with the same figure and appearance as her? Sure enough, the world is full of strange things. However, now was not the time to care about the past. Faceless One is a very terrible opponent. Aya went straight to the point. This time, since he came forward, we must unite and go all out. Yes, everything is in accordance with your will. As soon as Aya's voice fell, Archbishop Rowan decisively expressed his position. Aya laughed in spite of herself and was about to argue that she was not that Joan of Arc, but Rowan rushed to say, "Perhaps you don't remember the past, but I once swore to you that I will serve you like I serve the holy light. As long as it is your will, I will unconditionally execute it, at all costs." Aya opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but in her mind came Wang Lu's persuasive voice, "Isn't that good? It's better to have a bishop's brain-dead fan than to have a disloyal old fox." Aya was silent. In the current situation, they must unite all the forces that could be united, because the opponent was Faceless One. When Aya was still the Night King, she once fought against him. At that time, her strength was far superior to her opponent. The symbol of the royal power, the Caliban, could split the sky and the earth, collapse the mountains and break the rivers. Even a legendary level powerhouse would find it difficult to face it head-on. And at that time, Faceless One had not even crossed the threshold of high order. However, it was still a bitter battle. The opponent was treacherous, unpredictable, unscrupulous, and inhumane. He could humiliate and kill children less than 10 years old to provoke the opponent and make him fall into a trap. He could also transform into a woman and assassinate the opponent in the midst of sexual intercourse. In short, it was difficult to convert the advantage of frontal power into victory. In the end, with the help of many companions, Aya forced him into a dead end and dismembered him with the Caliban. However, after more than 100 years, Faceless One was still alive, and his strength was even stronger than before. So what? Listening to Aya's concerns through primordial spirit, Wang Lu disapproved. "Last time, you didn't have me by your side." Aya was somewhat amused, but also somewhat warm. Don't underestimate the enemy. The opponent is a devil who is very good at playing with human nature. Wang Lu shrugged. The problem is, I don't have any human nature for him to play with. I am driven by beastly nature. Chapter 312. It was time for the 10-day meeting in the Dragon City Cathedral. During the assembly, in addition to the lowest-level priest trainee, the thousands of clergy in Dragon City must gather together to listen to the bishop in the magnificent cathedral to convey the will of the Holy Light and assign the latest task. The power of Holy Light religion in Dragon City was very powerful. Merely in the priest team that was on the surface, there were dozens of high-order professions. Among them, Archbishop Rowan was an intermediate high-order professions, which could be equivalent to Yuanying stage. There were also 7 or 8 people of the same level, and there were hundreds of middle-order professions. So many priests gathered together to sing the hymn of the Holy Light. The pious power of faith, under the guidance of the bishop, would make the Holy Light in the cathedral soar to the sky, like a divine sword that could run through the world. This scene would happen once every 10 days, but every time it happened, the hearts of those who saw it would still be filled with fascination. This was the rule set by Archbishop Rowan decades ago. He wanted to use this kind of daily ritual to constantly engrave the brand of Holy Light in people's hearts. As for the effect, it could be seen from the tenfold increase in the number of believers in the past few decades. Dressed in a gray robe, Peter had been busy since before dawn. As a church's middle-order priest, if placed in other places, he could already become the bishop of a small town, with power over one side. However, in the Dragon City diocese, there were hundreds of clergy like him, so a middle-order priest was nothing special. Fortunately, however, he got the attention and value of Archbishop Rowan, so his future was much brighter than those common faces. It was 10 years ago, by chance, when the Archbishop inspected the priest's dormitory. Most of the young priests in the dormitory were in a mess, but Peter was the only one who arranged everything in order. This left a good impression on the Archbishop. In the next few years, the Archbishop gradually assigned some small chores to Peter, and every time, Peter did it beautifully, without any negligence. Therefore, now, Peter was responsible for the work of the 10-day assembly. It sounded simple, but to arrange thousands of people in an orderly manner was also a test of one's ability. Peter and the servants in the cathedral had started preparing before dawn. Finally, an hour before the assembly began, all the work was ready. Then, he patiently waited for more and more priests to gather from all directions, waiting for the arrival of the Archbishop. According to common sense, he would appear in the middle of the square and first chant a hymn to attract faith and stimulate the holy light so that the divine sword of holy light would pierce through the firmament. After the ceremony, the work for the next 10 days would be arranged. Peter stood next to the stage where the Archbishop was speaking, waiting quietly. However, even when it was past the appointed time, the Archbishop still did not appear. He was actually late. Peter was shocked. For decades, unless there was a special mission in the Holy City that kept the Archbishop occupied, he had never been late for a meeting. Could it be? Peter winked at a young clergyman in the rear, and told him to go to the Archbishop's bedroom. But before he finished assigning tasks, he suddenly felt that the atmosphere in the square was a little strange. Turning his head, Peter was surprised to find that there was another person on the high platform where the Archbishop used to stand. It was a tall and thin man dressed in a pure and holy white robe. What was shocking was that this person's face was completely blank without any facial features. He looked eerie and terrifying, causing people to tremble with fear. "Who are you?" Peter wanted to ask for the first time, but he found that he could not open his mouth at all, let alone make a sound. Obviously, the same was true for other people in the square. Otherwise, someone would have come forward to question why this stranger was standing in the position of the Archbishop. "Quiet." The faceless man raised his hand. "I am the new Chief Inquisitor appointed by the Holy City." Before everyone had time to question, the faceless man released a special holy light. "This is the proof of the Holy City." Among the thousands of people present, most of them had enough knowledge to recognize the emblem of the Holy City. After seeing that it was indeed issued by the Holy City, everyone relaxed their vigilance. It was just strange. Why did the Inquisition, which had always been low-key, suddenly become so high-profile? In the past few decades, the judges of the Inquisition had never attended a meeting. Among these thousands of clergymen, more than 80% had never even seen the Chief Inquisitor, Count Conrad. And why the Church suddenly changed the Chief Inquisitor was even more unknown. I know that many people are wondering why the Chief Inquisitor changed from Conrad to me. And why would I, as the leader of a shady organization like the Inquisition, appear in this open and above-board gathering like yours? To put it simply, I am here with a sacred mission. I need to change the status quo of this city. Many of the old rules will be broken, and new rules will be established. Faceless One said, for example, "From now on, I will replace the former Archbishop Rowan in the management of the parish. I hope you can seriously cooperate with me." As soon as this remark came out, the audience was in an uproar. As a confidant of the Archbishop, Peter was so surprised that the scripture that he held in his hand fell to the ground. Replace the Archbishop Rowan to preside over the work? What kind of method was this? Rowan has been the manager of the Dragon City Parish for more than 30 years. During this period, he has been conscientious and never had any major oversight. Moreover, now that he was old, most people thought that he would stay in the position of the Archbishop until he retired. The senior clergymen of Holy Light religion were lifelong, so it meant that he would not rest until he died. So, why would a new chief inquisitor suddenly appear to take away the authority of Rowan? Moreover, even if they wanted to find someone to replace Rowan, they should be promoted from the local priest. In Dragon City, there were more than 10 to 20 senior priests who coveted the position of archbishop, and each of them had the capital to succeed the position. At the very least, they could promote the parish's holy woman, at least their popularity was strong enough. However, the inquisitor had always been walking in the shadows, so how could it jump to the front of the stage now? Because there is no one available in the Dragon City parish. Faceless One made a seemingly helpless gesture. Your archbishop and holy woman have defected to the enemy. Holy City believes that the clergyman of the local parish can no longer be trusted, so I can only take control of all the work. Boom! Like a sudden clap of thunder, Peter felt that he was in a daze and his heart was beating wildly. The archbishop and holy woman defected to the enemy? How could this be possible? There must be a mistake somewhere. Looking around, the people in the square were also in disbelief. One after another, they cast shocked eyes. However, Faceless One didn't even hesitate to give a further explanation. He just said, the defection of the two people is the result of the conspiracy of the Dragon City Master Bedivere. Bedivere has the ambition of a wolf, so he tried to use the top-down infiltration to collapse the power of Holy Light religion in Dragon City. Fortunately, the Holy One of Holy City has a keen eye for detail and exposed his plot in advance. Now that the two traitors have defected, we have to bravely pursue the cornered enemy and nail the traitor and the mastermind Bedivere to the stake. Well, in short, it's to launch a war against Dragon City. Launch a war against Dragon City? Peter's heart tightened. The word war was too far away for the priests of Dragon City. Everyone knew that the church and Dragon City might eventually have a war, but everyone felt that at least, they would not be able to see that day. This kind of thing like war, it's better to be early than late. I think now that we're all here, we might as well go. Let's catch them off guard. Who in the world would be caught off guard? However, with so many people, if the command is not properly dispatched, it would just be a motley crew. Therefore, I've prepared a commander for you. With that, Faceless One raised his hand, and suddenly, hundreds of golden figures rose in the square in front of the cathedral. Peter's eyes narrowed as he recognized those golden figures. Bright archons? Holy Light religion specially designed puppet life form for the crusade against heresy. They have no real independent wisdom, but have unparalleled war talent. Bright archons could establish a spiritual link with dozens of priests through their common belief in holy light, and then accurately command each of them, skillfully grasping every detail of the battlefield. They were natural war machines. This kind of puppet life form had huge power in a large-scale war, and was a rare super basic commander. Holy Light religion has always regarded them as their trump card, and only dispatched them to deal with exceptionally tenacious opponents. But now, unexpectedly, there were more than 100 of them. The scale was no less than the Holy War. Relax your spirit, I have assigned you your respective commander. When the time comes, you just need to follow the order. It's very simple to deal with the heresy. The priests in the square were bewildered. This morning, in a short period of time, there were too many changes that they were overwhelmed. This Faceless One's swift and decisive action was too. Peter, who was the closest to the platform, saw that no one was talking nearby. Thinking about the consequences of the war, he had to summon up his courage to admonish, Mr. Inquisitor, launching the Holy War is a matter of great importance, we need to be cautious. Faceless One said, are you questioning my sloppiness? I don't dare. It's just that, this is too sudden. As the current administrator of Dragon City Parish, with the authorization of Holy City, I don't need to seek anyone's opinion to launch the Holy War. As for sudden. Faceless One suddenly turned his head. If it's not sudden, do you think I'll let you spies leak the news in advance? Boom! Facing that pale face, Peter felt that all the secrets in his heart could not be hidden. Yes, he was indeed a spy placed in the church by Dragon City. Dragon City and Holy Light Religion have been dealing with each other for decades, so their mutual penetration has long reached a very high level. Moreover, as a confidant of the Archbishop, he was not the highest-ranking one. The two forces haven't had a big friction for decades, and the credit of these spies as mediators was very great. They didn't need to come forward to make any big move. They just needed to add a little bit of force in the daily operation, which could make things change a lot. Therefore, their existence was also very hidden. For example, even the Archbishop didn't see that he actually had a connection with Dragon City. However, now, his identity was actually seen through by a foreign inquisitor. Boundless fear fell from the sky and enveloped his mind. In short, since we're going to start the war, let's clean up the traitors first. Faceless One waved his hand. Suddenly, Peter felt his head heat up, as if he heard a crisp crackling sound, and then he didn't know what happened. At the same time, on the square, hundreds of blood flowers bloomed above the heads. Chapter 313. The morning in Dragon City was busy and orderly. The large and small shops in the business district had just ended their night of revelry and had a short rest. Soon, they would nervously start a new day's journey. The people in the residential area opened their sleepy eyes, got up to wash up, and began the busy day. In addition, in the streets and lanes, the workers who were responsible for maintaining the normal operation of the city had begun to work hard. As always, a bustling and simple day was about to begin. However, when everyone was still in high spirits and still sleepy, the sky suddenly flashed, and a dazzling golden light fell from the sky, straight into the ground. For a time, the entire Dragon City was plunged into a sea of light. The boundless light swallowed everything. Everyone was blinded by the strong light, as if they were in a furnace. No matter how much sleepiness they felt, it was swept away. After no one knows how long, the light gradually dissipated. People opened their eyes that were in pain and tears. In the haze, they vaguely saw that there seemed to be a sword piercing down from the sky. It was a platinum sword that ran through the sky. In their amazement, some knowledgeable people recognized that sword. Gradually, they opened their mouths and incredulously spat out two words. Divine Judgment. The platinum sword was the symbol of the holy war launched by Holy Light Religion. More than 100 Middle Order and 10 High Order priests prayed together to summon the will of Holy Light to punish. One sword strike was enough to destroy a city in an instant. However, the power of that sword strike just now was not weakened. It was just highly compressed in a narrow area, located in the range of a fortress in the Dragon City military camp area. The meaning of the Holy War Sword of Holy Light Religion was inserted in the Dragon City military camp area could not be any more obvious. The war that everyone predicted would happen had finally begun. In front of the cathedral, thousands of priests formed a huge array, chanting the hymn of Holy Light together. The power of Holy Light thus stimulated was highly synchronized, forming a common force, which triggered an earth-shattering great divine technique. An hour ago, they were still preparing for the once-in-10 days gathering. An hour later, a war that would change the strategic situation in Bretonia was started by their own hands. In just 1 hour, it felt like a lifetime had passed. Not everyone liked war, just like most people didn't believe in the betrayal of the Archbishop and the Holy Woman. However, under the circumstances, it didn't matter whether they believed it or not. This newly appointed head judge had won over everyone present with more than 100 bloody heads. Nowadays, there weren't too many secrets in the church. After several decades of peaceful coexistence, many people were already used to it. Quite a few people had some idea of who in the church was colluding with Dragon City, which was why they were even more shocked. The new chief inquisitor had actually accurately pulled out every single nail. How was this a newly appointed official? It was more like a veteran who knew the ins and outs of the situation had suddenly rebelled. Other than the bloody suppression, the chief judge also showed kindness and authority. He also revealed a trump card that boosted the morale of the crowd. Since it's a holy war, I have countless benefits waiting for you. For those with outstanding military exploits, I will personally open the door to the Holy Land for you. If there were any casualties, they would receive 3 times the compensation. At the same time, in this battle, I will always be at the forefront. With both kindness and might, they really have no reason not to fight. Not to mention, if they could really take this opportunity to uproot Dragon City guards and make Holy Light religion the dominant force, it would not be a bad thing. No matter how many resources Dragon City had, they were still limited. It was better for one city to monopolize them than for 2 cities to share them. In a trance, the priests gradually began to accept reality. If war was unavoidable, then, they would fight. Boom! The sword of holy light that descended from the vault of heaven destroyed the outermost core fortress of the Dragon City guards with a single blow. Hundreds of Dragon City guards stationed inside the fortress were silently annihilated. Fortunately, Dragon City guards had a strict work and rest schedule. When the sword of holy light fell, it was the morning exercise time for the fortress guards. Most of the Dragon City guards, especially the few with the highest rank, came out from the fortress. Otherwise, the loss would be several times more. Even so, in the face of the blow that fell from the sky, Dragon City guards were still somewhat in a trance. What was going on? Was Holy Light religion ready to launch a war in Dragon City? Then, what should they do? After decades of peaceful coexistence with Holy Light religion, people's sense of crisis only stayed on the surface. The sudden outbreak of war completely caught Dragon City guards off guard. Although these soldiers, who had received strict training, still reacted in the first instance, sounded the alarm, assembled the team, and prepared for the fight. However, most of the faces of Dragon City guards were at a loss. Did the war come just like that? Why? How could this be? At the same time, in a gloomy fortress isolated from the rest of the world in the barracks area, Bedivere slowly stood up in his study room. Through the glass window of the study room, the chaos outside could be seen in a panoramic view. At the same time, the sword of holy light that ran through the sky was particularly dazzling. Humph, it's finally here. If there was anyone in Dragon City who was not surprised by this sudden war, it was Bedivere. Or rather, he had been looking forward to this scene for a long time. For this reason, he had been preparing for a long time. That sword of holy light was actually aimed at him. Its power was strong enough to seriously injure or even kill him when he was unprepared. However, there was a dragon vein spell in the barracks area. When attacked, it could forcibly summon a fortress as a stand-in to withstand the blow for the city master. This caused Holy Light religion's preemptive strike to lose its aim. However, the sword of Holy Light did not disappear after that blow. The chorus of thousands of priests provided an endless stream of energy to maintain its shape. And in the horrified eyes of countless people, the sword of holy light slowly but powerfully rose from the ground and rose back into the air. The tip of the sword slightly turned as it began to prepare for the next strike. In the barracks area, some Dragon City guards began to spontaneously counterattack, arrows that were powerful enough to penetrate the city wall, flaming fireballs that could melt metal and stone, and curses that used blood as a medium. Dragon City guards from all over the continent each showed their magical ability, trying to dispel the sword of holy light in the air. Because everyone knew that the next time the sword of holy light fell, it would bring several times, even dozens of times more casualties. However, the unorganized resistance was doomed to be futile. The sword of holy light that symbolized the will of holy light was like a steep inverted mountain. Under the intensive attack, it was firm and unshakable. Its level of existence was completely beyond the motley crew of Dragon City guards. Even if the resistance of Dragon City guards was 10 times more intense, it would still be indifferent. However, at this time, Bedivere made his move. He walked out of the fortress and transformed into a dark cloud-like dragon. His thunderous roar echoed over Dragon City. Dragon City guards, the war has begun. With just this declaration of war, thousands of Dragon City guards felt as if there was a stabilizing force in their hearts. Their confusion and fear vanished and were replaced by firm fighting intent. The morale change happened in an instant, because they were no longer a group of dragons without a leader. The leader of Dragon City guards had bravely stepped forward. Bedivere's incarnation of dragon soared straight into the sky. His huge dragon body and the inverted sword of holy light were actually equal. However, the dragon's flexibility and strength were undoubtedly far superior. Seeing Bedivere rose into the sky, the sword seemed to want to turn around and attack. However, just as the sword blade turned, the huge dragon body bypassed the sword blade and crashed into the sword. The highly condensed product of holy light fell apart at this moment. The holy light that Dragon City guards were helpless against was smashed into pieces. To deal with a high-level opponent, the only way was to bring out an equally high-level weapon. Bedivere's full power was close to the legendary level, which immediately broke the unprepared holy judgment. However, before the Dragon City guards had the time to cheer, another change occurred. From within the broken holy light, a snow-white figure suddenly appeared. In front of the dragon, that figure was as small as a grain of sand. However, in his hand was an astonishingly long spear, which stabbed Bedivere. In a split second, the hard scales on Bedivere's body melted and cracked, and then the spear went straight through. The wound caused by the spear was like a needle prick to the huge dragon. However, Bedivere uttered a painful and angry roar. His dragon body quickly disintegrated, and in the blink of an eye, he returned to his human form, which then confronted the sneak attacker. Bedivere was wearing a military uniform. When he dispelled his dragon form, he changed into the Knights of the Round Table. Opposite him was a tall and thin man in a white robe. His face was blank. "Oh, the Dragon Slayer spear that was specially made for you is really effective." Faceless One faintly smiled and then casually threw down the priceless spear. The role of the spear was to seal the dragon blood in Bedivere's body, so that he could not turn into a dragon. Now that the purpose has been achieved, the spear was meaningless. "But, I thought I could still take away half of your life. You're really tenacious, and your strength is actually a lot stronger than what the data showed." Bedivere frowned. Feeling the increasingly weak dragon power in his body, his mind was actually thinking of another question. Where are Marina and Irene? Upon hearing this question, Faceless One was suddenly startled. In his view, weren't those two people and Archbishop Rowan already rescued by Bedivere? Now that he asked about it, what was going on? Was it someone else who rescued them that day? However, the advantage of Faceless One was that no one could read his mind from his expression. After suppressing the doubt in his heart, Faceless One laughed and said, "Are you talking about those two apostate female bastards? I've already eaten them. Especially your daughter, her taste is really fresh and tender. I used a bamboo stick to skewer 100 of them and ate them all night, but I still haven't had enough, ha ha ha. You're courting death." Bedivere's eyes turned blood red as he rushed straight toward Faceless One. The dragon power in his body was suppressed to the limit, but the power belonging to the Knights of the Round Table had been pushed to an unprecedented peak. In an instant, the long sword with inscriptions was waved thousands of times, setting off a tornado that could destroy everything. Faceless One's figure flickered incessantly, cleverly avoiding each slash. However, his counterattack was also bounced off by Bedivere's knight's heavy armor, and thus failed. Oh, unexpectedly powerful. Even in a violent rage, you don't reveal any flaw. You're indeed worthy to be the former knights of the Round Table. Faceless One calmly said, however, as long as the weakness of human nature is still there, there's nothing great about it. With that, Faceless One pulled out 2 daggers and engaged Bedivere in close combat. Although he couldn't hurt the enemy, he could still entangle Bedivere. At the same time, another Faceless One appeared on the ground. His aura was much weaker than the Faceless One in the sky, but his unique temperament was exactly the same as the original. Well, weren't those 2 bastards saved by Bedivere? But their aura is clearly hidden here. Forget it, in short, let's find them first and force Bedivere to submit. To deal with a veteran like Bedivere, empty threats were meaningless. Only by really controlling his wife and children could he really influence him. However, on the other hand, Bedivere was stubborn but extremely sentimental. Even if he was determined to sacrifice Marina and her daughter, when they really appeared in front of him, it was impossible for his heart of stone not to be affected. Therefore, he had to drag them out. Although the aura of the 2 people seemed to be deliberately concealed, for him, the executioner of holy light religion, the smell of apostate could never be hidden. Are they there? It only took Faceless One a moment to determine the location of Marina and her daughter. While his main body in the sky was entangled with Bedivere, his avatar immediately rushed to the place where Marina and her daughter were. It was in the barracks area, the accommodation area for the recruits. Marina and her daughter were on the 2nd floor of a single-family villa. Faceless One didn't need to run, but directly moved by flashing. Each time his figure flashed, he could move nearly 100 meters. In just a few blinks of an eye, he had arrived at the 2nd floor of the small building. On the 2nd floor, Marina, holding her daughter, looked in horror at the sudden appearance of Faceless One in front of her. "Let's go," Faceless One lightly said and then reached out to grab Marina. However, a sharp sword light intercepted him halfway. "Since you're here, don't be in a hurry to leave." The words were spoken in the common language, but the one who spoke was an authentic 9 regions cultivator. Meeting a 9 regions cultivator in this place at this time was indeed unexpected. However, Faceless One simply ignored him. "Don't get in the way, small fry." Then, his figure flashed past that 9 regions cultivator and directly went to grab Marina. However, when he landed on the ground, he found that the space had changed. All around him was the bloody sky and the earth, and the dense forest of broken swords. "No one can cross my sword defense," Wang Lu lightly said and then turned around. Chapter 314. The all-out war between Holy Light Religion and Dragon City Guards broke out. Thousands of priests triggered the Holy Sword of Judgment, which was the declaration of the start of the war. Faceless One hid in the Holy Sword of Judgment to launch a sneak attack on Bedivere, which was to confirm his promise: in the battle, he would always rush to the forefront. When the supreme leaders of both sides fought in mid-air, a large-scale battle immediately began. The Holy Light Religion army surrounded the barracks area from all directions. Thousands of priests, holy knights who obeyed the command of Holy Light Religion, as well as inquisitors, followed Faceless One's footsteps into the barracks area. The Dragon City Guards were caught unprepared. They lost the initiative and were immediately squeezed into the barracks area. However, this barracks area was the crystallization of their decades of operation. Every fortress, every brick of the city wall was condensed with the power of the Dragon City Guards. As long as they defended this place, even if Holy Light Religion could gain the upper hand, it would be difficult for them to achieve substantial results. In addition to the fortress that was destroyed by the Holy Sword of Judgment, Dragon City Guards firmly controlled the rest of the fortresses, propping up an impregnable line of defense, isolating the Holy Light Religion army outside. In terms of power, Holy Light Religion was several times more powerful than Dragon City Guards. However, Dragon City Guards were, after all, professional warriors. In a favorable situation, they could fight against 10 enemies alone. Brats, keep your spirits up. Pay attention to the golden archons in the enemy's formation. As long as we kill them, the other side will be completely scattered. Holy knights composed of priests and young masters who haven't seen blood are not worthy to carry our shoes. We are the glorious Dragon City Guards, we can't lose to this group of scum. On a fortress on the periphery of Dragon City, the High Order Guard Marcus roared and, at the same time, used the chainsaw in his hand to behead one enemy after another. His fortress was located at the forefront of the battlefield. Originally, it was indestructible along with the other fortresses. However, because of the Holy Sword of Judgment, the most important one was directly destroyed. Now, it seemed isolated and helpless. Soon, it was firmly surrounded by the Holy Light Religion army and fell into a desperate situation. The bottom layers of the fortress have fallen, and the remaining Dragon City Guards have been forced to the top. The High Order Guard Marcus personally stood at the forefront, trying to delay the time and wait for support. Even though everyone could tell that reinforcements probably wouldn't arrive, they would at least drag a few more Holy Light dogs down with them before they died. Amidst the roars and shouts, the screams of a few guards could be heard. The other defense line on the top floor was on the verge of collapse. It turned out that when the Holy Light Religion's Archon saw that Marcus' line of defense was impregnable, he commanded 3 relatively obedient elite priests to circle around and attack Marcus' flank, causing serious casualties. Marcus spat out a mouthful of blood. Braving the backlash, he took a step forward and chopped the Radiant Archon in 2. Then, with a backhand scorching sun chop, he broke the tendons and bones of several priests before quickly returning to the front line. He held the golden head of the Archon in his hand and shouted loudly to boost morale, "Do you see that?" This kind of golden bastard was indeed powerful, but the Holy Light Religion kids were just a mob. They have no blood, no bone, no will to fight, they were just walking corpses. They can't even protect their own commander. Put your life on the line and kill these Archons. The goddess of victory is on our side. However, his men weakly responded, "I know, just say the same thing once, don't say it over and over again like a sales pitch, sir." Damn! Marcus was amused, but also comforted. Although Dragon City Guards were caught off guard, their quality was obviously superior to the opponent. Even if they dispatched the Radiant Archon, the cleverest housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. How could a group of priests who had no fighting spirit and were afraid of death break through Dragon City Guard's line of defense? It could be said that he handed over the first few layers of the fortress to the enemy, but the last layer of defense, he did not yield even an inch. There was no way to deal with these incompetent priests. Our people, as long as we laugh and joke around, we can completely disintegrate the opponent's offensive. As for the human wave tactic? Come on, bring as many people as possible. The more power this fortress attracted, the lighter the pressure on other places. Marcus had long been ready to die in the line of duty without regret. Little ones, come on. If you win this battle, I will invite you to have fun with the girls of the serene dream blue sea. Huh, sir, you have to keep your word. If I don't die, then I will have fun with 5. Bah, your firewood stick can't even fill one, let the others do it. Marcus laughed, but his laughter came to an abrupt stop. A sword tip stained with blood came out of his chest. His most trusted deputy used all his strength to stab a 2-handed heavy sword into Marcus' body. The frenzied chi attached to the sword frantically stirred Marcus' internal organs, instantly shredding his vitality. Marcus never expected such a change. He opened his mouth, wanting to ask something, but only spurted out a rain of blood, as well as a large mass of internal organ fragments. At the same time, the Dragon City Guards, who had recovered from their shock, instantly dismembered the traitor. But everyone looked at him with incomprehensible eyes. Why? Aren't you the person that Sir Marcus values the most? I'm sorry, my family is still outside the barracks area. At the same time, similar scenes continued to happen. The line of defense of Dragon City guards that had just stabilized began to fall apart because of the frequent attacks of the traitor. This was a nearly fatal blow. The line of defense of Dragon City guards was like a precision machine. Any part of it had an irreplaceable role. Once there was a frequent mistake, it could completely collapse. It was not that Dragon City guards did not consider the spies sent by the church, but after decades of experience, which one was suspicious, which one was trustworthy, which one was actually known by the higher-ups. Naturally, they would be on guard during the battle. But this time, the traitor was often the deeply trusted Dragon City guards. In fact, this was simply unavoidable. Dragon City guards was not an abstinent organization. Most of them had their own families. Some of them chose to live in the barracks area, but most of them were willing to live in the residential areas of Dragon City, where the conditions were more convenient. Therefore, when the Holy Light religion suddenly launched a surprise attack and surrounded the barracks area, it was tantamount to controlling the family of Dragon City guards in their hands, which became the most powerful trump card. Oh, unexpectedly, the effect of this trump card is better than expected. Didn't you do any combat preparation? In the sky, Faceless One, who was fiercely fighting with Bedivere, curiously asked. Although it's a surprise attack, you're really unprepared. After a pause, Faceless One smiled. You're smarter than I thought. When Marina and the others were rescued, it was more or less intentional. Because Marina and the others would inevitably leak his existence, which would arouse Bedivere's vigilance. Then, it would be a hasty preparation. However, once the news of the impending war spread out, could Dragon City guards really unite in a short period of time and fully prepare for the war? When most of their family members were still outside the barracks area, when everyone has been accustomed to the relatively comfortable life in Dragon City, could they adjust their mentality in a short period of time and throw themselves into the battle? If Bedivere was given a few days, perhaps he could use his prestige and means to change the mentality of Dragon City guards. However, with only a day or even half a day, could he do it? The biggest weapon of Dragon City guards was unity and well-trained. Once their morale collapsed, they were simply unable to contend against the numerical superiority of Holy Light religion. Faceless One left a nail in the coffin, but Bedivere was not fooled at all. He would rather be caught off guard, but in this sudden war, everyone had no choice. They could only instinctively resist, struggle, and survive. However, it would erupt with amazing cohesion. According to Faceless One's speculation, in the best-case scenario, Dragon City guards shouldn't even be able to survive the first round. However, their current performance had far exceeded the expectation. Although you're a bastard, you're a good opponent. Don't you want to consider throwing yourself into the embrace of Holy Light? I can give you amnesty. Faceless One lightly threw out the bait. Bedivere's response was an earth-shattering sweep of his heavy sword. The sword light crossed over Faceless One, crossed over Dragon City, and cut off a corner of the distant snow-capped mountain. The snow fell like a landslide. What a strong anger, it's almost materialized. It's too boring to fight against a stupid, big, and thick opponent like you. Faceless One flashed to avoid Bedivere's sword. At the same time, he constantly used spells to distort the space, avoiding being trapped by the opponent in the space layer, and at the same time, trapping the opponent. Then, his attention was gradually diverted to the other side. TSK, that 9 regions bastard is unexpectedly tenacious. He's just a middle-order profession, how could he be so tough? Ha ha ha, come and hit me hard. If you don't kill me, you can't escape from my magical ability, and you can't take Bedivere's wife and children hostage. Speaking of which, as the dark hand behind the scenes, you should reveal your domineering aura as soon as you appear. You, this villain, are really unprofessional. In the world of swords, Wang Lu's non-phase sword drew out a 3-feet sword defense, while Faceless One's avatar stood outside the sword defense, looking at the opponent with great confusion. Obviously, he was just a small fry equivalent to a middle-order profession, so how could his defensive ability be so powerful? Although his avatar's power was less than 1/10 of the original's, its strength was enough to crush a high-order profession. However, just now, he had used more than 30 different methods, yet none of them could break his sword defense. Perhaps even those legendary professions with the highest bloodline were not this powerful. What kind of method did this Eastern heretic use? But, as for the specific content, I'll slowly interrogate him after the victory. Right now, the focus is not on him. Humph, continue to be a turtle here, I don't have time to accompany you to play games. While speaking, Faceless One's aura suddenly doubled. He extracted 10% of his power from the original body to strengthen his avatar. However, it was not used to break the sword defense, but to suppress Wang Lu's magical ability. The will of the Holy Light is not bound by anything, free and unrestrained. Faceless One's powerful Holy Light power broke out in the form of the Spirit of Words, which suddenly broke a huge hole in the world of swords. Your 3-feet sword defense is indeed powerful, but your inherent enchantment is much worse. If you have the chance in your next life, you can cultivate it again. Faceless One's figure became more and more ethereal and transparent. Obviously, it was difficult for this broken world to bind him. After Faceless One escaped, although Wang Lu could protect himself, he might not be able to protect Marina and her daughter. Want to leave? Sure, as long as you leave, I will immediately activate the curse to kill Marina and her daughter. If you have the ability, then use their bodies to threaten Bedivere. Faceless One's body, which had already turned away, slowly turned back. What did you say? Marina and her daughter have a curse inside their bodies. If you dare to leave, I will dare to kill them. Faceless One was stunned for a moment. Sure enough, you and Bedivere are not on the same side. But, if you kill his wife and daughter, aren't you afraid that he will turn against you? Wang Lu laughed. Since I'm not on the same side, what am I afraid of? Killing Marina and her daughter was, of course, a bad plan, but it was better than being helpless. Faceless One observed Wang Lu for a moment and then made a decision. I really didn't expect that there would be a variable like you. You can have this chess piece, I don't want it anymore. With that, Faceless One flickered and disappeared. He didn't leave, but completely disappeared. This avatar was completely absorbed by the original body. At the same time, Bedivere's painful roar came from the sky. Strengthen the strength of the original body and suppress Bedivere as fast as possible. As long as he killed Bedivere, the victory of the war would naturally be in his hands. Why should he entangle himself with an inexplicable variable? Marina and her daughter were good chess pieces, but they were only chess pieces. If he didn't want them, what else could he do? Wang Lu retracted his original magical ability and looked at the deteriorating situation in the sky. He shook his head and said with a smile, variable? Among all the variables today, I'm the least worth mentioning. Chapter 315. In the sky above Dragon City, the fight between Bedivere and Faceless One had entered a white-hot stage. After withdrawing his avatar, Faceless One's power skyrocketed, and he began to turn from defense to offense. Endless holy light spells, like a tide, rushed toward Bedivere. The lonely figure of the Knight of the Round Table seemed humble and small in the vast sea of light, completely falling into a disadvantageous position. Faceless One's fighting style was very special. Obviously, he had an overwhelming advantage in strength, but when he made his move, he still aimed to attack the opponent's mind. The holy light energy was manipulated by him into all kinds of illusions, projecting the opponent's most fearful picture. Sometimes it was Marina and her daughter being dismembered, sometimes it was Bedivere's former comrades in arms covered in blood that demanded his life. He could even project the phantom of the Night King that Bedivere swore allegiance to, forcing Bedivere to kneel down and beg for mercy, giving up resistance. These illusions naturally didn't have much effect on a strong-willed warrior, but in the face of an opponent with an overwhelming advantage, any trace of hesitation or surprise would bring disastrous consequences. Faceless One didn't need Bedivere's mind to collapse. As long as he was slightly caught in the illusion, a series of fatal blows would follow. Bedivere held the knight's sword. Along with the flow of the inscription on the sword, the power bestowed to him by the Night King continued to emerge, pushing him to continue to fight. He had no intention to be angry at the opponent's despicableness. Faceless One's playing with human nature was already an instinct. This was his fighting style, and it was the same for anyone. Moreover, the winner would not be condemned. What he had to do was to make his heart infinitely close to ice cold, unshaken by any external things. Only in this way could he have a slim chance of winning. The all-out fight between two high-order professions changed the color of the sky. The sky of Dragon City was torn apart by sword energy and holy light. The clear sun was cut into countless pieces. Some were covered in dark clouds, some were flashing with lightning and thunder, some were the deep night sky, and some were even the sceneries of hell. The law of heaven and earth had begun to be disordered, which made no one dare to approach the sky battlefield. They could only quietly wait for the outcome of the battle between the two high-order professions. In truth, even though everyone was fighting fiercely during the attack and defense of Dragon City, the battlefield was strictly stratified. People with different levels of strength would not easily fight against each other, because that was inefficient. For example, Bedivere and Faceless One, although there was a gap in strength, they were both advanced high order, close to legendary level. Intermediate high-order professions, who were one level lower, could not intervene in the battle between these two people. Just the aftermath of the battle would be enough to crush them. They had to invest dozens of high-order professions in order to have a decisive impact on the battle. But how could high-order professions be wasted like this? It was very difficult for low-level professionals to have the ability to survive in front of opponents of a higher level. Using a simple human wave tactic was very inefficient. Of course, high-level professions could completely sweep away low-level professions, but would the high-level professions of the opposing faction just stand by and watch? The key to the battle was in the middle. For most battles between factions, victory and defeat would start from the middle battlefield, because most of the senior professions had strong survival and harassment abilities. Unless the absolute strength difference was too great, they could at least delay the opponent. However, the difference in the strength of the upper echelons was too great, so it would not be a battle, but a pure massacre. Generally speaking, once the outcome of the battle in the middle layer was decided, one could go up or down at will. It was very flexible. Yes, he could sweep away the low-level professionals like a whirlwind. On the other hand, a well-prepared team of intermediate professionals was also an extremely powerful chess piece. Therefore, the middle layer had always been the key to the battle. And now, on the battlefield in Dragon City, the two forces were barely equal. Although Dragon City was in a disadvantageous position, it could still hold on. However, the middle-level forces of Holy Light Religion had shown an overwhelming advantage. In fact, in terms of the number of middle-level forces, Holy Light Religion was far above Dragon City Guards. It was only because Dragon City Guards had rich combat experience, coupled with the geographical advantage of the military camp area, that they could barely hold on. However, after Holy Light Religion launched the traitors among Dragon City Guards, this balance was broken. The outermost line of defense was soon broken through. Holy Light Religion, under the leadership of the Holy Knights, quickly broke into the inner line and engaged Dragon City Guards in close combat, quickly nibbling away the living space of the other side. In the blink of an eye, the front line was on the verge of collapse. "Hey, your men are being slaughtered, aren't you going to do something about it?" In the sky, Faceless One lightly asked. Bedivere simply disdained to respond. He rotated the inscription on his knight sword and continued to change his offensive, trying to capture the flickering trajectory of the opposite party. His opponent was Faceless One. Besides that, there was no need to consider anything else. At this time, if he was defeated because of distraction, it would only release a terrifying devil, which would be irresponsible to his comrades. Seeing that his provocation was ineffective, Faceless One said, "Or do you have that much confidence in the inner line fortress?" While speaking, Dragon City guards have been forced into the innermost defensive circle by Holy Light Religion. Supported by the three fortresses, Bedivere's mansion was the last trump card in the military camp area. When most of the Dragon City guards retreated into the inner guards, the barracks area suddenly shook, and the three fortresses located in the core of the inner circle rose from the ground. The cyan bricks and stones seemed to have a life of their own, squirming like flowing water. The square-shaped fortresses rose from the ground and turned into giants made of bricks and stones. These giants were extremely powerful alchemy life forms. Any one of them had the strength of a high-order profession, and in the narrow battlefield, their lethality was unparalleled. They had infinite strength and swift action. After their transformation, they immediately swung their heavy fists and fiercely smashed the vanguard Holy Knights of Holy Light Religion, breaking their tendons and bones. The fists of these giants were as big as a hill, and it just so happened that in order to compress the front line, the Holy Knights' formation was very dense. With one punch, more than a dozen people would turn into meat sauce. However, the giant's blue body was indestructible. Any holy light spell that hit it would be turned into nothingness, without the slightest effect. Encountering such an opponent, the frontline legion of Holy Light Religion had a tendency to collapse. However, the morale of Dragon City guards was greatly boosted, and they began to counterattack with all their might, unexpectedly pushing the frontline by a large margin. The original absolute disadvantage also faintly showed the hope of a comeback. Humph, decades of operation is indeed not easy. You've actually accumulated so many of these blue bricks blessed by the holy light, enough to build 3 fortress giants. Dragon City Parish is indeed rotten, it needs to be purified. While suppressing Bedivere, Faceless One commented on the battlefield below with great interest. However, decades of operation is too long. Do you think we really know nothing about these 3 giants? The blue bricks that are immune to Holy Light spell are made by our Holy Light Religion. Do you think we don't have any backup plan? Bedivere didn't answer, but his knight's sword attack became more and more fierce. At this time, a high-ranking priest of Holy Light Religion suddenly stepped forward and loudly recited, "All the blessings in the world come from the Holy Light, and the will of the Holy Light leads everything. Those who steal from the Holy Light will not last long, and will be punished by the Holy Light." At the same time, the 3 bluestone fortress giants trembled violently. Each of the blue bricks that made up their body groaned in pain under the recitation of the high-ranking priest. The miracle of the Holy Light came from the Holy Light, and the priest, as the spokesperson of the Holy Light, naturally had the right to take back these miracles. In just a moment, the 3 giants' bodies continued to soar up platinum balls of light. That was the blessing power of the Holy Light, and also the source of the Holy Light spell immunity. However, at this time, they have all been driven away. Without the spell immunity, the Bluestone Fortress giants were just a large target. The Holy Light Religion priests rallied and bombarded the giants with a large number of spells, which soon drowned the giants. These valiant alchemy creatures uttered earth-shaking wails, but they were inevitably disintegrated little by little. At this time, at the corner of the battlefield, a sorrowful old man said, "Madam Holy Maiden, please let me stop all this. This war is meaningless." Stop all this? Can you do it? A sword-wielding 9 regions cultivator chuckled and interjected, "Be careful not to get involved and lose your reputation. In any case, I must do my best to stop this tragedy from continuing. You won't give up until you see the Yellow River. Then go ahead and try, I'll be waiting to collect your corpse." Seeing that his persuasion was ineffective, the 9 regions cultivator shrugged indifferently. "Looking forward to your good news." The old man took a deep look at him, and then looked at the holy maiden whom he pledged allegiance to. "Madam Holy Maiden, I'm going." The holy maiden nodded. I look forward to your peaceful resolution of this dispute." Next to her, someone imperceptibly said to himself, "Peaceful? Aya, you're still too naive." The situation on the battlefield once again tilted in the direction of Dragon City guards. Under the intensive bombardment of spells, the 3 bluestone giants were bruised and on the verge of collapse. The morale of Dragon City guards was greatly damaged and gradually pushed back. And the fortress that originally formed the core of the inner defense line has stood up. Therefore, at this time, the inner defense line was tantamount to being defenseless. If they were once again overwhelmed by holy light religion, there would be no possibility of reversing the situation on the battlefield. However, just as the priests were ready to completely disintegrate the 3 bluestone giants, a white light soared into the sky, and the voice of Archbishop Rowan resounded in all directions. "Children of the holy light, please stop." The battlefield fell into silence in an instant. The 2 warring sides coincidentally stopped and focused their attention on the Archbishop in the sky. After attracting everyone's attention through the holy word technique, Archbishop Rowan sighed and said, "This is a meaningless war. The one who started the war is the despicable and shameless devil who stole the holy light. We have been living in peace with Dragon City guards for so many years, why would we inexplicably launch a lose-lose war? For decades, we have never been enemies. Even if we have different beliefs, we are still friends who live in the same world. Among us, how many of us have a friend from the opposite camp? Among us, how many of us secretly admire someone from the other camp? From the initial indifference, to the later gradual familiarity, and one day, we can become real brothers and sisters. So, why do we hurt each other? Why do we have to set off a reign of terror? Can any of you tell me, why? On the battlefield, everyone was shocked by this sudden turn of events, and everyone was silent. I know, it's because some despicable and shameless devil, in the name of the holy city, forced you to fight each other, forced you to launch an unjust war. He forged the mark of the holy city and has a powerful force. You are at a loss and can only obey his orders, but I am imprisoned by him and can't show up to set things right. But now, it's all over." The voice of Archbishop Rowan echoed repeatedly in Dragon City. As the person involved, Faceless One just sneered, as if he saw a barking wild dog, and then continued to attack Bedivere. However, Bedivere also didn't notice the existence of Rowan. His mind was completely devoted to the battle with Faceless One. Along with the fierce fighting sound in the sky battlefield, the sound of dialogue gradually appeared on the battlefield. A moment later, a Dragon City guard loudly shouted, "Stop." That's easy to say. So many people have died here, how can we stop? Can you bring them back to life? Yes, if the war hasn't started, it's fine if you show up to stop it. But now that the blood has flowed like a river, you still want everyone to stop fighting? Who do you think you are? Even the priests of holy light religion, at this time, were somewhat bloodshot. No matter how high the prestige of Archbishop Rowan was, it was impossible for them to stop. But Rowan was also secretly complaining. In the past, when he and Faceless One exchanged blows, he was seriously injured by the holy light spell. Later on, he was fortunately rescued by Wang Lu and indeed escaped with his life. However, not long after he knelt in front of Jean d'Arc, his injury broke out and he fell unconscious. It wasn't until the war officially began and the holy light energy surged endlessly that he sensed it and resuscitation came. Just a few minutes ago, at that time, the blood had already flowed like a river. But now, he had no choice but to stop this fight. This war is not the will of any of you. You are just used by others, reduced to his sword and knife. If there is a sin, it should be blamed on the culprit who started this conspiracy. Look, he's still swaggering above your heads. Rowan tried his best to stimulate the power of holy light so that his voice could better stir people's hearts and induce their thinking. Children of holy light, please recognize your enemy and adjust the direction of your sword and knife. Elites of Dragon City, loyal servants of holy light, please put down your enmity, don't let your loved ones suffer and the enemy be happy. You have a common enemy, a common threat. At least now, at this moment, please join hands to eradicate the biggest villain. Upon hearing this, the people present were all moved. For the people of holy light religion, if not for this inexplicable chief inquisitor, who would be willing to fight against an opponent whose strength was almost the same as theirs? In Dragon City, they enjoyed the most luxurious life in the land of Bretonia, the safest environment. When there was a foreign enemy threat, it was always the Dragon City Guards, this group of coolies, to solve the problem. Eradicating heretics and the like has long been forgotten. Of course, perhaps it was more in their interest for holy light religion to dominate Dragon City. However, if this interest had to be exchanged with everyone's life, the price would be too big. Moreover, Faceless One's high-pressure policy also made them hesitant. In fact, until now, the performance of holy light religion on the battlefield has not been positive. After being integrated by Faceless One, their comprehensive strength was several times that of the opponent, but in actual combat, their advantage was not so obvious. For Dragon City Guards, this could be considered as a relief. First, they could integrate their strength to help their city master deal with the strongest opponent, which was naturally good. At that time, even if holy light religion wanted to continue the war, Dragon City would not be afraid. With Bedivir's free hand, it was enough to sweep the battlefield. In just a few words, Archbishop Rowan successfully provoked the mood of the people present, and the focus of hatred gradually shifted to Faceless One. However, in response to this, Faceless One just sneered. Is the show over? Then it's my turn to say something. While speaking, Faceless One in the sky split out an avatar. Although the avatar's power was only less than 1% of his, its disdainful momentum was not reduced in the slightest. You bunch of idiots, you're actually confused by the words of an apostate. Have your faith in holy light been fed to the dogs? Faceless One didn't care how great the hatred would be aroused by his vicious attack. Because he had a killing move that could decide the universe. Your beloved former Archbishop Rowan is a member of the Priory of Zion. Chapter 3:16. If you casually stopped a person and asked him what the Priory of Zion was, most of the answer would be inexplicable. The Priory of Zion, even within the holy light religion, was a secret that could not be casually spread. Among the thousands of priests and holy knights present, only less than half of them knew the meaning of this word. In short, it was a group of rebels hidden within the church. They also had the faith of the holy light, but they were not of the same mind as the church. On the surface, they obeyed the rule of the church, but secretly plotted to overthrow it. The official statement within the church was that the Priory of Zion was a group of shameless heretics who stole the faith. Although they could use the holy light, they were the biggest enemy of the church. However, the Priory of Zion had existed for a long time. For those who were familiar with the inside story, the Priory of Zion meant that the rule of the holy light religion was not as honorable as they said. Perhaps the Sea of Holy Light was supreme, but their human spokesperson was obviously not. Of course, at least on the surface, the Priory of Zion was still the sworn enemy of the holy light religion, the largest illegal organization. They killed the members of the Priory of Zion without asking any reason. You said that the Archbishop is a member of the Priory of Zion. What evidence do you have? A priest who had always loved the Archbishop loudly asked. At the beginning, when Faceless One claimed that the Archbishop and the Holy Maiden were apostles, he already had his doubts. Now, he even claimed that the Archbishop was a member of the Priory of Zion, which was simply nailing him to the pillar of shame. Moreover, how could other people believe such a slander without any evidence? Evidence? Since Rowan is here, why don't you let him personally show the evidence? Rowan, show everyone your heart of faith. If you are not a member of the Priory of Zion, I will commit suicide in front of you. What do you think? Faceless One laughed, simply took out a pen and drew a warm smiling face on his face. Rowan, as long as you are willing to show your heart of faith, if I wronged you, I will collapse my heart of faith and die in front of you. I am a man of my word, and I can swear on my faith as proof. So, it's up to you. All eyes turned to Rowan. If he was inexplicably questioned and asked to prove his innocence, Rowan could scold, I don't need to show my faith to the devil, his decades of piety is enough to win people's trust. Faceless One, on the other hand, used a high-pressure policy, forcing the Archbishop and the Holy Maiden to rebel. His means were radical and even sinister, so it was necessary for him to show his heart of faith. But now, the situation was different. Faceless One had piled the stakes to infinity, using his life as a guarantee, so Rowan could only keep up. Previously, he rendered Faceless One as the root of all evil. As long as he is eliminated, everything will be peaceful. Now, there is a way to eliminate Faceless One effortlessly. Do you want to use it? As long as you lose a bit of face, you will be able to kill the villain. Are you going to do it or not? Rowan had no other choice. Facing the gazes of tens of millions of people, Rowan sighed, worthy of being the sharpest knife in the holy city. I can't believe that after so many years, no one has discovered this secret, but it is so obvious in your eyes. While speaking, Luo Wan opened his chest. A white light shone on his chest, and a platinum heart-shaped object emerged. It was Rowan's heart of faith. At the same time, waves of exclamations of surprise rose and fell within Dragon City. The luster of the heart of faith was pure and clear, symbolizing Rowan's unswerving faith in the holy light. As the Archbishop of the diocese, Rowan's faith was undoubtedly firm and devout. However, on the heart of faith, there was a deep mark, like an ugly scar, which was exceptionally eye-catching. And it was this mark that caused countless exclamations, because it was the symbol of the Priory of Zion. Faceless One was right. The Archbishop, who had served the Church for decades, was the biggest traitor of the Church. After his biggest secret was exposed, the Archbishop appeared to be extraordinarily calm. He faintly withdrew the heart of faith, put on his holy robe, and then said, Since Joan of Arc was burned at the stake 80 years ago, I knew that the Church was hopeless. A saint who saved millions of believers was forcibly slandered as a heretic, while the top leaders of the Church were immersed in the Golden King's inheritance in Taba City, and even refused to look back at the evil that was happening behind their backs. Although they posthumously conferred the title of Supreme Saintess, they forbade the story of Joan of Arc to spread in the world, constantly obliterating her influence, making the world forget her existence, in order to cover up their own mistakes. By the way, the two saints who made the decision and personally carried it out were not investigated. They did the wrong thing and killed the wrong person, yet they still got away with it. How could people not question such a church? His speech was not impassioned. The secret that had been buried in his heart for decades was exposed, but Rowan was neither happy nor sad. Because it didn't matter anymore. He had once again seen Joan of Arc. Even if he died immediately, even if he lost his reputation, so what? Unfortunately, at the last moment of his life, he could not realize the saintess expectation. This war could not be settled by him alone. That's really a moving speech. You can even rebel so brilliantly, what else can't you do? Unfortunately, if you didn't join the hermit order and were willing to lose your reputation, you could still use your identity as an archbishop to make those words public, which would be somewhat convincing. But now, what I hear is just the ravings of an apostate. Holy light believers, there are only two paths in front of you. Either you go down the evil path with the apostate with compassion, or you use the sword in your hand to prove your faith. With that, the avatar of Faceless One disappeared like an illusion and was absorbed by the main body, which continued to suppress Bedivere. On the battlefield, the atmosphere began to change rapidly. Those priests who once sympathized with the archbishop and were hesitant about Faceless One have made a decision in their hearts. The story of the archbishop was indeed wonderful, but no matter how wonderful the story was, it could not cover up the fact that he was an apostate. Even if they didn't know the significance of the Priory Order of Zion, at this time, from the word of mouth of the people on the battlefield, it became clear to them. They were the sworn enemy of the Church, and anyone who sympathized with or supported the Hermit Order would, without exception, be treated as an apostate. If previously, people still had a lot of doubts about the sudden appearance of Faceless One as the Chief Inquisitor, but at this time, many of those doubts have been dispelled. Faceless One acted aggressively because this time, the opponent he faced was the local bully who had held the position of Archbishop for more than 40 years. His forces were everywhere in Dragon City. If there was no thunderous surprise attack, who knew what would happen? Therefore, although there was still some reluctance in their hearts, the members of the Priory Order of Zion must die. On the Holy Light religion side, an unprecedented morale was gathered. The priests and holy knights were united against the common enemy and clenched their weapons. Ha ha ha, Rowan, thank you for exposing your shortcomings so that our army can become more powerful. Now, it's time to launch a general attack and wipe out the apostate and the heretics in one fell swoop. Along with Faceless One's wild laughter, the Holy Light religion believers began to press forward. In order to be closer to the front line, the priests' formation became more compact. Although the possibility of suffering damage was greatly increased, in the Holy War, seeing that the victory was already decided, people couldn't care less. At this time, it was more important than anything else to prove themselves with the courage to sacrifice themselves. And at the same time, Wang Lu, who was watching with cold eyes, lightly said, "The flower-picking operation can begin." The war had entered its final moment. The battlefield was like an egg. The Dragon City Guards were compressed into a ball by the White Holy Light Army. Without the protection of the last three fortresses, the Dragon City Guards had no place to defend. The line of defense built with flesh and blood was crumbling. So far, the damage suffered by the Dragon City Guards was not too big. The previous front shift was to exchange precious space for breathing time. Among the more than 30 high-order professions present in the Dragon City Guards, after the fierce battle, they only lost 3 or 4 people. The casualties in the middle level were relatively heavy, but it was still less than 1/5. With the elite Dragon City Guards, their morale did not suffer too much of a setback. On the other hand, the loss of Holy Light religion was twice as large. This time, with the full mobilization of 80 high-order professions brought by Faceless One from the provincial capital, they also lost 1/10 of their high-order professions. The loss in the middle level was even heavier. The two sides barely formed a balance. However, this was the end of the evenly matched situation. After losing all the strategic depth, the Dragon City Guards' geographical advantage was almost completely shattered. They could no longer rely on the familiar terrain and prearranged formations to display their tactical expertise and quickly annihilate the enemy's effective forces with local advantages. They had to rely on their flesh and blood to face the superior force several times their own. Dragon City Guards were like a highly squeezed egg that could be crushed at any time. However, they had no way to reverse the situation. The strongest leader, Bedivere, was caught in a bitter fight in the air. His silver knight armor was covered with scars, and even the inscription on his knight sword was flickering. The sharp sword chi was dim. Compared to the initial one that could cut off a mountain, its power had been reduced by more than half. Defeat was only a matter of time. The high-order professions of Dragon City guards, facing more than twice the number of opponents, could only rely on the taboo method of burning their life to barely contend. The middle-level forces could rely on tactical command to fight against the many, but the Holy Light religion followers had gradually adapted to the command of the Archon. In terms of tactics, they quickly caught up and faintly had the momentum to overtake them. No matter from which point of view, Dragon City guards were doomed to lose. At this time, unless there was another external force that could affect the situation. However, within the radius of thousands of miles around Dragon City, where else could there be an external force that could overturn the situation? In the air, Faceless One once again used a sneak attack to stab the dagger with the infinite curse into Bedivere's body, tilting the balance of victory to one side. However, at the same time, his attention was focused below. If there was any possibility of change now. Just now, the Nine Regions person who used a strange method to intercept and capture Marina and her daughter was the biggest suspect. Come on, let me see the ability of you Nine Regions people. Just as this thought crossed his mind, on the battlefield, in a place where more than 100 priests gathered, more than 10 magnificent sword lights suddenly burst out, like a blooming rainbow flower. The flower was incomparably gorgeous, but it contained a life-taking murderous intention. Each petal was like a sharp sword blade, and anyone who touched it would die. When the flower bloomed, more than 100 priests were instantly minced into minced meat. Among the stamen of the flower, a girl in a gorgeous dress was slowly retrieving the more than 10 flying swords that were scattered outside. On her face, a smile bloomed like a flower. Chapter 317. The girl's smile disappeared in a flash. When the surrounding Holy Light believers discovered her presence and were ready to concentrate their firepower to eliminate this sneak attacker, the girl had already retrieved her flying sword, turned into a rainbow, and quickly flew to another corner. Her speed was so fast that even the high-order professions present were stunned and failed to catch her. Dozens of Holy Light spells fell on the place where the girl originally stood, shattering the illusion of the rainbow flower, but it was useless. Looking from above, the dense crowd of Holy Light religion camp seemed to have been dug out, forming a vacuum. The more than 100 priests, including more than 15 middle-order priests, didn't even have the room to resist before they were abruptly stirred into dregs. Judging from the girl's aura, she hasn't even crossed the threshold of high-order profession, but the power of her sword strike was close to the eruption of an intermediate high-order profession, which was simply appalling. However, whether it was Nine Regions or Western Continent, it was not uncommon to see geniuses whose real strength was far stronger than what they appeared to be. Although the middle order and high order profession strength were appalling, they were not without precedent. Therefore, after the initial brief consternation, Holy Light religion quickly responded. Considering that the speed of the Nine Regions girl was too fast for the average person to intercept, 2 high-order Holy Knights pulled out from the battlefield and followed the girl's figure. Generally speaking, to deal with this kind of young genius with amazing explosive power, the experienced and prudent high-order profession was the most suitable. As long as they didn't reveal any flaw in the young genius' endless explosive means, the gap in the final stage would soon be revealed. In contrast, the Holy Knights with their full body armor and amazing physical strength were naturally the most suitable to undertake this task. The 2 high-order Holy Knights abandoned their opponents and chased after the girl. They were blessed with Holy Light spells, so their speed was astonishingly fast. Although the Nine Regions girl's movement was fast, she was inevitably slowed down by the Holy Light believers. When the Holy Knights got close, they immediately noticed the weakness of the Nine Regions girl. Her attack power and speed were indeed unparalleled, but her defense was not strong. Just now, she didn't dare to take the holy light spells of the several middle-order priests head-on. Instead, she changed her course of action to evade. To deal with such an opponent, as long as they cooperated with others to limit her action and then put up a good defense so that she wouldn't have the opportunity to take advantage of them, victory would be at hand. Ahead, the holy light cage. A paladin shouted loudly, ordering a team of priests to collectively release holy light spells to create an insurmountable barrier in front of them. This kind of holy light cage didn't have any special characteristics other than being extremely sturdy. However, when the girl saw it, she casually waved a crimson-red sword chi and punched a hole in the wall of light. She passed through the hole without slowing down at all. Just how strong is this guy's explosive power? The holy knight was shocked. The holy light spell released by dozens of priests could not stop her at all. Instead, it was used by her. The hole created by the young lady was not big enough for a woman to pass through, but the two fully armored holy knights could not pass through. They could only use their swords to shatter the entire cage. Seizing this opportunity, the girl once again transformed into a streak of rainbow light and rushed into an area with a high concentration of priests. She unleashed a deadly rainbow flower and reaped more than 100 lives. Seeing this scene, the two holy knights were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They immediately activated the teleportation spell on their boots, trying to appear directly beside the girl and then, one on the left and one on the right, exerting pressure on her from different directions. Using the spell on their boots would interfere with the protection of the armor for a short period of time. However, the two holy knights couldn't care too much about it at this time. However, the two holy knights' figures flashed, and just as they finished the teleportation, they felt a darkness above their heads as a behemoth covered them. Their vision turned black, and then they didn't know what happened. The hundreds of people around them watched as a mottled dog suddenly swelled 100 times, turned into a ferocious giant beast, and then swallowed 2 high-order professions in one gulp without spitting out any residue. Oh, this is the infant of the devastator demon wolf Fenrir? This was the first time that Faceless One, in the midst of a fierce battle, paid attention to the battlefield below. Whether it was the appearance of Wang Lu or the eruption of Lu Li, he didn't pay too much attention to them. However, when the devastator demon wolf also appeared on the battlefield, Faceless One could no longer continue to ignore it. It was not that the infant of the devastator demon wolf was more powerful than the previous several people, but rather, the successive emergence of variables caused the quantitative change to trigger a qualitative change. The role of Wang Lu, Lu Li, and the devastator demon wolf, any one of them could be equivalent to an intermediate high-order profession. Moreover, there were less than 20 intermediate high-order professions in the entire battlefield. The sudden addition of these 3 people was enough to break the balance. In fact, the 2 outbursts of Lu Li alone had greatly shaken the Holy Light religion, and then the World Destroyer Demon Wolf made its move, which directly swallowed the 2 high-order Holy Knights. The surrounding hundreds of priests and Holy Knights were affected and dared not to move forward. The crumbling defensive line of Dragon City guards immediately got a chance to breathe. Almost no one in 9 regions recognized the devastator demon wolf, but in the Western continent, it was not difficult to hear its name if one was knowledgeable. The demon wolf Fenrir, who had just entered adulthood, was already equivalent to legendary level. When it fully matured, it could even step into the realm of God, which was a nightmarish opponent. Fenrir's strongest ability was to swallow. Anything that was swallowed by it was a dead end. The strength of this infant was barely equivalent to a low-order high-order profession. However, once the sneak attack was successful, even a holy knight with amazing defense would be instantly killed after being swallowed by it. With it around, except for a few people, no one could be considered safe. Coupled with the legend that the devastator demon wolf once swallowed the god, the blow to the morale was simply fatal. If left alone, although it was not certain that Dragon City guards could successfully turn the tables, it would, after all, add a lot of variables to the battle. However, in Holy Light religion, who could deal with these sudden changes? Are you trying to force me to make my move? Faceless One nodded. Very well, as you wish. The next moment, Faceless One suddenly disappeared from the battlefield. Bedivere, who was suppressed to the point that he could hardly breathe, was immediately relieved. For a long time, he was at a loss. At the same time, just as Lu Li retrieved her flying sword, she saw a tall, white-robed faceless man in front of her. Regarding this person, her senior brother had already told her enough. Without hesitation, the 12 flying swords that formed the brilliant sword array fully erupted. At the same time, she also held her strongest killing move, the immortal sword Skybreaker, in her hand. That horrifying life-taking rainbow was actually far from Lu Li's strongest means. The full power of the brilliant sword heart was enough to make an intermediate high-order profession tremble in fear. However, for a high-order faceless one, no matter how brilliant Lu Li's means were, it was just a child's play. The level difference was too big. He didn't even need to pay attention to the opponent's attack. With his holy robe and physical protection, he could resist it. And Lu Li couldn't even touch the aftermath of his attack. Merely the power of his move was enough to make Lu Li's breathing difficult and her jade mansion agitated. However, the moment Faceless One made his move, an exceptionally familiar heavy sword light shone in front of him. Wang Lu mysteriously appeared in front of Faceless One. His 3-feet sword defense propped up an unbreakable barrier. Faceless One's move suddenly slowed down for a moment. It was as if he didn't want to confront the non-phase sword light head-on. Of course, no matter how powerful the defense of a middle-order profession was, it was still a joke in front of a high-order profession. It was equivalent to the power of a deity stage cultivator, which was by no means something that a Shudan stage cultivator like Wang Lu could contend against. However, Faceless One seemed to be afraid of something. There was a trace of hesitation when he made his move. However, the next moment, Faceless One stretched out his right hand, and a supreme mysterious method condensed in his palm. And just at this time, Wang Lu suddenly took a step forward. His non-phase sword, which was originally in an absolute disadvantage, unexpectedly took the initiative to find the opponent. The collision of power that spanned countless stages broke out. In one strike, hundreds of crisp cracking sounds were connected into a string, as if countless precious magical treasures were crushed at the same time. At the same time, the light and shadow behind Wang Lu distorted, revealing Bai Shishuan's slightly flushed face. This was Wang Lu's well-prepared all-out blow. Relying on the treasures he brought from 9 regions, as well as the countless treasures he collected in the western continent, plus Bai Shishuan's full help, he was able to launch a cross-stage non-phase nameless sword. Even if the opponent was a high-order profession, it could still rebound once, but only once. If the cost of this strike was converted into spirit stones, it would be at least in the millions or tens of millions. However, if the opponent was a high-order profession, it was difficult to measure whether it was worth it or not. Not to mention that the core figure of Holy Light religion was Faceless One. As long as Faceless One was defeated, this war would immediately be won. Buying the victory of a war with millions of spirit stones was simply a big profit. Therefore, Wang Lu had been planning for a long time and did not hesitate to launch this sword strike. Non-phase sword was the first to collide with Faceless One's divine technique. The power that was several stages higher than Wang Lu's surged violently like a surging tide. At that moment, Wang Lu clearly realized that if he relied on himself, even 100 lives would not be enough. However, now that he had the backing of millions of spirit stones, he had the power to fight against the surging tide. Kneel down in front of the money player. At this moment, Wang Lu even burned his innate vitality. His non-phase sword expanded by millions of times, turning into a dam that was enough to block the tide. The next moment, the two forces fiercely collided. Wang Lu did not have a 100% chance of winning, not even half. The opponent was, after all, a high-order profession, the number one person below the legendary level in the church. If the opponent wanted to kill him at all costs, millions of spirit stones might not be enough. However, there was no such thing as a free win in this world. If he didn't go all out, it was impossible to win. Victory and defeat were decided in an instant. The ferocious waves crashed into the dam and then rolled back. This sword strike actually gave Wang Lu the upper hand. Nameless Sword's counterattack power was displayed to the extreme. The platinum light was forced back by the sword of Mount Kun, completely engulfing Faceless One's pale figure. On the battlefield, Wang Lu stood with his sword in hand. His body slightly trembled due to the excessive release of magical power. The tip of the sword of Mount Kun was stained with Faceless One's blood, but Faceless One had disappeared without a trace, as if he had completely evaporated. He actually won this sword strike. However, there was not even the slightest smile on Wang Lu's face. The victory was too easy. The attack that he prepared with millions of spirit stones seemed to have fallen into the air. Faceless One's momentum was menacing, but his momentum was weak. The power of his attack was only 1/10 of the expected. Encountering Wang Lu's millions of spirit stones, it immediately collapsed. It was simply a joke. Although Faceless One had indeed turned into ashes before his eyes, Wang Lu really didn't think that he had won. Sure enough, the next moment, Faceless One's laughter came from afar. Ha ha ha, what an eye-opening sword strike. I'll give you this avatar, and then I'll kindly accept Marina and her daughter. Wang Lu helplessly sighed. He was indeed worthy to be the church's sharp knife, not that easy to be fooled. Just now, when the two sides collided, Faceless One had a higher chance of winning. However, he simply disdained to gamble, so he would rather sacrifice an avatar. Taking advantage of the absence of Wang Lu, his real body directly went to rob Marina and her daughter. The key to this war was Bedivere, the tenacious high-order knight of the Round Table, not the variables like Wang Lu, Luli, and Fenrir. Faceless One was always absolutely calm at any time, so he could always find the flaws of the opponent and take advantage of them. Right now, Marina and her daughter were unprotected. Bedivere was still somewhat stunned in the sky, completely without the ability to respond. After a breath's time, Faceless One's figure reappeared in the sky, but this time, he was carrying a person in each of his hands. The petite one was Irene, and the plump one was Marina. Bedivere, admit defeat. Faceless One lightly said, save me some strength, I'll give you some leeway. At this time, Bedivere was like a dried-up oil lamp, barely able to support himself from falling down. Perhaps he still had the ability to perish together with Faceless One, but to save people from the other side was already a fantasy. However, even with Faceless One as a hostage, Bedivere still refused to waver. He spat out a "pay" sound and simply disdained to answer. Faceless One mentioned Marina and Irene. I know you don't care about their life and death, but women always have things that are more important than life and death. You should believe that I can do it. Bedivere's complexion was gloomy, but inwardly, he had already made a decision. His eyes reluctantly swept over his daughter, as if he wanted to keep her figure in his heart. Irene, facing her father's eyes, tried to make a strong expression, but she couldn't help but burst into tears. The little girl loudly shouted, Dad, I'm not afraid of anything. Bedivere's eyes became hot, and he had to turn his head sideways. However, the next moment, Bedivere was suddenly stunned, because he saw that in the other hand of Faceless One, Marina, she. At the same time, Faceless One also noticed the abnormality. His figure flashed and was about to leave. However, he was one step too late. Marina, who was held in his right hand, moved incredibly fast. A heavy sword appeared out of thin air and pierced Faceless One's chest. Under the broken sunlight, Marina's brown hair gradually showed a golden luster. Chapter 318. In the military camp area of Dragon City, thousands of people were divided into two camps, fighting fiercely. The Dragon City guards were on one side, and the priests, holy knights, and judges of the church were on the other side. Ever since the Holy Sword of Divine Judgment opened the curtains of the war had already lasted for more than half a day. During this period, this war alarmed countless foreign forces. Around Dragon City, more than 10 cities all had people watching the battle. Some were city lords themselves, and some were trusted aides of the city lords. In addition, forces such as the Shadow Brotherhood and the Mercenary Association were also involved to varying degrees. Everyone knew that the outcome of this war would greatly affect the strategic pattern of Bretonia for the next few decades or even hundreds of years. Of course, the victory of Holy Light Religion seemed to be without suspense, but how much resources would it consume to annihilate Dragon City guards, to annihilate the Knight of the Round Table Bedivere from the Night King era to the present? Would the dominance of Holy Light Religion in Bretonia be stronger or weaker? Would the forces of power that had dealings with Dragon City be affected? If Dragon City somehow managed to win the war, what should they do next? Would the Holy Light Church abandon Bretonia? Or should they face the chaos in the east and destroy the remnants of Dragon City first? If Holy Light Religion intended to give up this land, what would happen to those forces that were close to Holy Light Religion? After that, other than waiting here quietly for the results, perhaps he could personally participate in it and reap some benefits? For example, the Holy Light Religion has obviously come out in full force, so when they besiege the Dragon City guards, their own rear must be very empty. In the past, people only dared to covet the Holy Light Religion's treasure house, which they did not dare to rashly touch, was now wide open. Another example, Dragon City, as the most prosperous city in Bretonia, had too many hidden treasures. Now that most of the civilians had fled to the outskirts of the city, there were too many ownerless items in the city. On the other hand, regardless of whether Bedivere or Holy Light Religion won in the end, after the war, there must be a period of recuperation and restoration of order. This Dragon City could not be abandoned. In that case, if anyone had dared to commit crimes in the city, they would definitely be punished afterwards. During the period when people were committing crimes, those who helped to maintain order in the city would, of course, gain the friendship of the victors, no matter which side was the victor. With so many possibilities, it was truly difficult to make a decision. All the forces had their own inclination, but they also had their own concerns. Although this war started in a hurry, it was still the highest-level war in Bretonia in recent decades. There were nearly 100 high-grade professions participating in the war, which was nothing more than a common war between nations. In this game of chess, any move could bring about extreme consequences. Either one could enjoy endless glory and wealth, or die without a burial and never be able to rise again. During most of the day, the various families and sects made their own judgments. For the sake of safety, some decided to only watch from the sidelines and not personally enter the battlefield. There were also some who were extremely daring and sent people into Dragon City to try and take advantage of the situation. Some, relying on their strength, tried to join the side of Dragon City and Holy Light Religion to help in the fight. However, it was different from what many people imagined. Most of the people who personally participated were from small forces of power. The influential forces of power around Dragon City all chose to watch from the sidelines. The bigger the power, the more cautious they had to be. There were too many suspicious points in this battle, and it was far more complicated than it seemed. For example, the simplest question was, which side should one support in a battle between two sides? Most people would probably choose Holy Light religion. They felt that even if there was no timely help, the icing on the cake would not be wrong. However, the news that came out of the city from these big forces made people hesitant. The one who provoked the war in Dragon City was a madman from Holy City. That madman had no bottom line and did not follow the rules. With a few words, he could frame the loyal followers of Holy Light religion as traitors, and with a raise of his hand, he could make the heads of hundreds of priests fall to the ground. If such a person were to take charge of Dragon City in the future, who knew what he would do? For example, he could force the trade association to give up all their property. If they refused, it would be considered as disrespecting Holy Light religion. He could then send a judge to forcibly expropriate the property of the merchants and burn the leader of the resistance at the stake. This kind of thing was not something that Holy Light religion had never done before. Nowadays, a large part of the prosperity of Dragon City was due to the popularity of Archbishop Rowan, which made people feel at ease to invest and produce here. If it were Faceless One, who would feel at ease? And would the higher-ups of Holy Light religion really feel at ease to let such a madman take charge of Dragon City? Perhaps after the war, he would be recalled back to Holy City, and the church would send a new archbishop. At that time, they would have to start a new public relations process. And even if they tried their best to curry favor at this time, whether the new archbishop would appreciate it or not was another matter. Because of these uncertain factors, the big forces basically chose to watch from the sidelines. There were many good shows in Dragon City, and they did not disappoint. 30 miles outside the city, at the foot of the snow-capped mountain, a great knight sighed. Dragon City is indeed worthy to be the #1 city in Bretonia. The strength of this city is at least equivalent to half of Bretonia. The powerful people in this land seem to have been gathered by Dragon City guards and Holy Light religion. Compared to them, the other forces are not even qualified to serve as foils. This great knight was the son of the city master of Riddle City, and also the strongest person in Riddle City. He has always been proud of his middle-order high-order profession strength. However, witnessing this meat-grinder-like war, the great knight's heart was filled with a strong sense of frustration. In just half a day, the number of middle-order high-order professions that died were as many as 4 or 5 people, and the strength of many low-order high-order professions on the battlefield was not inferior to him. He, the strongest person in Riddle City, after entering the battlefield, perhaps even his shadow could not be found. Ha ha ha, if Mr. Viscount says so, wouldn't our blue tile city be even more miserable? I, the guardian of the city, am just a low-order high-order profession, put in that battlefield, I'm just a small fry. The great knight sneered and ignored the magician next to him. That guy has always been known for his sinister and cunning character. Although he seemed to be a low-order high-order profession, the number of middle-order high-order professions that died in his hands was quite a lot. If he were to face him, his odds of winning would only be 50-50. Seeing that the great knight ignored him, the magician grinned and said, "Moreover, after this battle, no matter who wins or loses, Dragon City's vitality will be greatly damaged, and its status will certainly plummet. Look, Dragon City Guard's resistance is so tenacious. Even if Holy Light religion wins, at least half of them will die. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us small fries." The great knight frowned and looked at the distant battlefield. Suddenly, a burst of alarm sounded in his heart, and he hastily took a few steps to the side. Then, a sharp sword chi came toward him, cutting the ground under the great knight's feet and the mountain behind him, leaving a bottomless crack. The magician sucked in a mouthful of cold air. The Dragon City Master's sword chi is really overbearing. Even though we're so far away, its power still hasn't diminished. I think we should retreat a bit more. The great knight didn't answer. He just stared at the distant sky, tenaciously fighting Bedivere. The bloody figure of the Knights of the Round Table fighting fiercely aroused a strong resonance in the Great Knight's mind. After a long time, the Great Knight subconsciously asked, seriously, which side do you want to win in your blue tile city? The magician didn't expect such a question, so he froze for a moment. Seeing that no one was around, he put away his playful expression and somewhat helplessly said, "This kind of thing, I don't have the final say. Just say what you think." The magician looked at the Great Knight. For most people in Bretonia, this question is not a problem, right? Do you think so? The magician quietly said, 50 years ago, I was a knight just like you. It wasn't until I was hit by an arrow in the knee that I changed my profession to study magic. But to this day, I actually prefer to be a knight. You know, one of the 3 cards in my hand is the Knight Incarnation technique. Many people who tried to deal with me in close combat have died under this move. The Great Knight froze for a moment. He didn't think that this always insidious magician would actually reveal his card. He couldn't help but laugh. A magician like you is rare. In Bretonia, it's actually not that rare. This is, after all, the kingdom of knights. Most people have a knight's dream. So, if I can choose, of course, I want Bedivere to win. I remember that Dragon City and your Blue Tile City once had a conflict. The magician said, the last city master that I served was killed by Bedivere, so I actually want Bedivere to die. But even if he dies, he should die in the hands of a knight, not in the hands of a sinister and ruthless swindler. After a pause, he continued, of course, given that there's no knight in Bretonia that can kill him, it's barely acceptable for him to die in the hands of us magicians. The Great Knight sighed again. Bretonia should be the kingdom of knights, and I'm afraid Dragon City is the last fortress of the knight's spirit. If it falls today, the soul of Bretonia will also collapse. Yes, but the opponent is so strong, I'm afraid Bedivere won't be able to hold on for long. That faceless one of holy light religion is too powerful. The Great Knight said, he's at the peak of advanced high order, half a step into legendary realm. Nowadays, only a few people in the entire Bretonia can compare with him. I'm afraid only the strongest few of the Knights of the Round Table, or the Night King himself, can defeat him. While speaking, in the sky above Dragon City, Bedivere and Faceless One once again fiercely confronted each other. The energy surged crazily, which further tore the broken sky. This made the strange phenomenon in the sky even more chaotic. TSK, these two people are really powerful, they even broke the sky. In broad daylight, I can actually see a meteor. The magician exclaimed, and then chuckled and said, legend has it that when you see a meteor and make a wish, the wish will come true. The Great Knight knew that this was just a relaxed expression from the magician, so naturally, he wouldn't take it seriously. He just looked at the distant sky above Dragon City, where a meteor would fall from the broken sky from time to time, and then the Great Knight whispered, I hope that His Majesty the Night King can come back from the dead and lead Bretonia to reunification. Cough. The magician almost choked. Isn't your wish too greedy? However, as soon as his voice fell, there was a decisive change in the battlefield above Dragon City. Holy Maiden Marina, who was held hostage by Faceless One, suddenly twisted her body and pushed her arm. A heavy sword appeared out of thin air in her hand, and then, like a lightning, it pierced into Faceless One's chest. This astonishing change shocked the audience. Thousands of Dragon City guards and holy light priests who risked their lives to fight even simultaneously stopped and looked up at the sky in a daze. Faceless One casually threw away the other hostage and pressed the giant sword in front of his chest with both of his hands. The majestic magical power of holy light was concentrated in his palm, trying to shatter the heavy sword. However, when his magical power collided with the sword, it was surged back, which caused his hands to explode and turn into a cloud of blood mist. At this time, Holy Maiden Marina began to gradually distort. Her tall figure rapidly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, she turned into a petite and exquisite girl. Her brown hair also showed a golden luster. The girl's dark green eyes were filled with a fierce sword intent, and her exquisite nose slightly wrinkled, showing that she was going all out at this time. As for the heavy sword in her hand, although it was covered in blood, its unique shape was clearly revealed. It was a heavy sword that no Bretonia person would mistake. According to legend, the holder of the royal power of Bretonia was the King of Bretonia. Sword in the Stone. Chapter 319. Any qualified Bretonia citizen would not be unfamiliar with the legend of the Sword in the Stone. Its previous and only master was the famous Night King of Bretonia, a peerless martial artist whose power once shook the world. When the Night King was young, he pulled out the Sword in the Stone and began his legendary life. He led the army to successive victories, defeated all the opponents in Bretonia, unified the regime, and established the Night Kingdom that was admired by countless people. Unfortunately, due to a series of internal conflicts, the prosperous kingdom soon fell apart. The King of Knights himself died from serious injuries during the War of Rebellion. Legend has it that the sword of the king, which he wielded, returned to the land of dreams along with his body, never to appear in the world again. That was the punishment of God to the people of Bretonia, punishing them for betraying the noble and flawless king, henceforth living in division and war. Of course, there were many legends about the Night King. Many people firmly believed that he was not dead, but was only temporarily asleep. There were even travelers from the east who said that a long, long time ago, they had seen the sword in the east. However, most of these rumors were difficult to verify. Now, the only thing that people firmly believed was that only the Night King could use the sword in the stone. It was the sword of the king, and also the sword that belonged to the Night King. It could never be given to others. Unless the Night King appeared, the sword in the stone would forever sleep. And now, the sword of the king that had disappeared for 100 years had unexpectedly reappeared in the world. Inside and outside Dragon City, millions of people stared at the sky, staring at the bloody sword that could not hide its sharpness. The Night King's sword in the stone? It's really the sword in the stone? As the proof of the royal power of Bretonia, the sword in the stone had an extraordinary significance for every citizen of Bretonia. When the sword in the stone appeared in the world, every Bretonia citizen who saw it would feel a throbbing desire to submit from the bottom of their heart. That kind of palpitating was unique. As long as one had a love for the land of Bretonia, they would not mistake it. Then, the more important question was, why is the sword in the stone in her hand? Who is she? The sword in the stone was the sword of the Night King. Only the Night King could pick up the sword in the stone. This was a self-evident truth in the land of Bretonia. But now, the sword in the stone was in the hands of a girl. Could it be that she was the Night King? Or, after over 100 years, had the sword in the stone given up on its original master? Countless questions filled their minds, causing them to even forget what they were supposed to do. Within Dragon City's barracks, thousands of people stopped fighting and stared blankly at the changes in the sky. I didn't expect it to be you. Even if his chest was pierced by a heavy sword, Faceless One's voice still remained calm. It was just that, under the serious injury, his voice was so weak that only the two of them could hear it. You really didn't die. In this regard, Aya didn't say a word. She just tried her best to stab the stone sword deeper into Faceless One's body. It could be said that Wang Lu had risked his life for this opportunity. Faceless One was a cautious and cunning person, so how could it be easy to deceive him? Aya once fought against Faceless One. At that time, there was no lack of wise people among her Knights of the Round Table. However, despite their joint efforts, Faceless One still managed to escape. To be honest, this was the first time for Aya to see Faceless One being deceived. If it weren't for Wang Lu using Lu Li, Quan Zouhua, and herself as bait, and sacrificing tens of millions of spirit stones to launch a sword strike that was enough to threaten a high-order profession, Faceless One would never hastily change his target to catch Marina and her daughter. And without that haste, it was impossible for him not to see that Marina had been replaced. And without that moment of negligence, Aya wouldn't have been able to stab him with her sword. As a spirit of the departed, her strength was far from returning to its peak. On the basis of trying to suppress the side effects, she could at most erupt with the power of a high-order profession, and only for a moment. With the supreme power of the divine weapon Stone Sword, Aya successfully broke through Faceless One's defense. However, after the heavy sword penetrated his body, Aya found that Faceless One's body had far exceeded the general category. She didn't know what kind of secret method was used to strengthen it. Not only was it as hard as steel, but it also contained an unusually powerful energy. Every time the stone sword penetrated a bit deeper, it could feel a great repulsive force. At the same time, the sword was also under intense pressure. Were it not for the indestructible stone sword, it would inevitably be damaged under this shock. However, Faceless One's resistance only lasted for a moment. Under the increasingly powerful destructive power of the stone sword, the resistance finally collapsed. Faceless One sighed. A large amount of blood gushed out from every pore of his body. Only his pale face remained white. "Congratulations, you've defeated the evil Faceless One and won this round." While saying that, Faceless One took out a pen and drew a bloody smiley face on his face. "But just like 100 years ago, the war is not over. I look forward to the third fight with you. I hope you can live to that time." With that, Faceless One's blood-stained robe suddenly twisted, as if a void vortex was created inside. Faceless One's entire body and the blood that gushed out were sucked dry by the vortex in a flash, disappearing without a trace. At this time, Aya was like a dried-up oil lamp. When the vortex sucked her, she felt her arms sink, and the stone sword faintly showed signs of falling out of her hand. She hastily pulled it back, but the vortex also disappeared. When her physical strength was exhausted, it suddenly caused a burst of annoyance inside her body. Her vision turned black, and she was about to fall. However, just as she was about to fall, a pair of powerful arms supported her. "Well done, Aya. Betting everything on you was really the right choice." Aya closed her eyes, feeling the warmth behind her. She didn't want to open her eyes, and didn't want to speak. She just faintly smiled and uttered an "M" sound. "AI, killing the big boss with one sword strike. Aya, you're really worthy to be the Night King, domineering." Listening to this obviously exaggerated and insincere praise, Aya was both angry and amused. However, the smile on her face became a bit more intense. "Hey, you used too much force just now, so your hair is a bit messy. The ahog on your head is sticking up. Do you want me to help you pluck it?" Aya suddenly opened her eyes. Her cold eyes made people shudder. "If you dare to touch it, you'll die." Damn, what kind of rule is this? Could it be that the ahog on your head has the same reproductive function as the stamen? "I can't touch it." While the two were laughing and joking, a heavy voice suddenly came in. "Who are you?" Bedivere's whole body was bathed in blood. He was also like a dried-up oil lamp, but he insisted on standing still. His blood-stained eyes stared straight at Aya and the stone sword in her hand. "This sword, why is it in your hand? Where is its original owner? What happened to His Majesty the Night King? He's still alive, right? You must know something." The more Bedivere talked, the more excited he became. Under the agitation of his emotions, his control over his body weakened a bit. Several wounds on his body ruptured and blood flowed out. Damn, Bedivere, your head is like a whale that's spurting blood. Bedivere seemed to not hear Wang Lu's exclamation. His eyes were always locked on Aya. What happened to His Majesty the Night King, please tell me. Aya could hardly face Bedivere's bloodshot eyes. For this loyal and devoted knight, her heart was moved beyond words, but more than that, she felt guilty. If it weren't for her mistake, how could Bretonia fall apart? How could those excellent knights of the Round Table kill each other? How could the heavy burden of protecting the dragon race's bloodline fall on Bedivere alone? Moreover, what could she say about the whereabouts of the Night King? I beg you. Whether you're the descendant of Galahad or someone else, please tell me, what happened to my king? Where is he? Bedivere's voice trembled in excitement. I've always missed him. Faced with this situation, Aya's heart was sour. Finally, she couldn't hold back anymore and slightly opened her mouth to say, she's the daughter of the Night King. From the side, Wang Lu coldly said, and then reached out to press Aya's shoulder. He poured his magical power into her so that she could no longer make a sound. It's obvious. In addition to the daughter of the Night King, who else could inherit the sword of the king? In addition to the daughter of the Night King, who else could easily behead Faceless One? Bedivere's whole body was greatly shaken. He incredulously looked at Aya. The daughter of the Night King? His Majesty the Night King left behind a descendant? However, the more Bedivere looked at her, the more he felt that the girl before him had too many similarities with the Night King who once ruled Bretonia. The same blonde hair, the same deep eyes. Although the color of the pupils was different, the heroic spirit between her eyebrows was of the same origin. Then, the most important thing was her power. Although it was still immature compared to the legendary level power of the Night King, the essence was almost exactly the same. Especially when he recalled that sword strike that assassinated Faceless One, it was full of the Night King's style. Even if it was a camouflage sneak attack, it still looked dignified and impressive. After a long silence, Bedivere startled. Then, what about His Majesty the Night King? Wang Lu coldly said, so what if you know? Don't you think he's tired enough? Upon hearing this, Bedivere was once again shocked. His mind suddenly returned to the time when he fought under the command of the Night King, back to the time when after endless glory and glory, there was a sharp turn and then a gloomy fall. After a long time, Bedivere's eyes were brimming with tears. Yes, this subordinate is incompetent, I'm ashamed. But I really want to know, is His Majesty okay? Wang Lu said, the person is still there, the will is still there, but everything in the world has its own reincarnation. He has done what he should do. Now, he has to wait for his descendant, that is, his daughter. Bedivere asked, does His Majesty want to? Do you still need to ask? Of course, it's to expel the church and restore the country. Expel the church and restore the country? This short sentence contained far too much content. After more than 100 years of infiltration, the church has long been deeply rooted in the land of Bretonia, and the belief in holy light has almost replaced the spirit of chivalry. How could it be easy to expel the church? However, this was the arrogant Night King who always pursued victory. If he succumbed to the power of the church, Bedivere would be disappointed instead. The last question, who are you? Bedivere seriously looked at Wang Lu. From the beginning to the end, everything about Aya was said by him. Aya herself didn't open her mouth, but there was no sign of resistance on her face. Obviously, she had a lot of trust in Wang Lu. But, how could Wang Lu be entrusted with such a heavy responsibility by the daughter of His Majesty the Night King? Wang Lu thought for a moment, and then said with a smile, City Master is really forgetful. Didn't I tell you earlier, I'm her gigolo. Gigolo your sister. Chapter 320. Why? In his primordial spirit, Aya's serious question could not be evaded. Why do you have to weave such a set of lies? Aya was Aya, the proud Night King, who would not hide her identity in front of anyone. When she returned to her hometown from the 9 regions, she was ready to face everything in the past, so she didn't need a fake identity to hide anything. Wang Lu sighed. This is not the time for you to show off. It's good to bravely reveal your identity, but do you think Bedivere can accept it? Do you really want your faithful love to break his cognitive world and blow his head? Wang Lu said, believe me, if you insist on claiming that the Night King is a soft girl, Bedivere will definitely kill himself in front of you. Thinking of Bedivere's one-track mind, Aya could do nothing about it. Moreover, do you really think it's a good thing to announce the identity of the Night King? Aya asked, what do you want to say? You've been in Bretonia for some time now, and we can see that the people of this land miss you very much. However, after 100 years of brewing, this nostalgia has reached the point of limitless beautification. It's as if the Night King in those days was perfect, omnipotent, and invincible. Aya laughed. Invincible, that's not wrong. Then why are you still looking for a way to win the war? Why don't you just write a diary so that future generations can admire your political and military achievements? The more you experience war, the more you can see your own shortcomings. But back to the point, what do you think is wrong with the people of Bretonia's nostalgia for me? Excessive beautification will make people unable to accept the reality. If people realize that the perfect king in their fantasy is, in reality, a waste that can't even cook fish-flavored shredded pork, how disappointed would they be? Do you have a problem with my fish-flavored shredded pork? Wang Lu also said, not to mention your current spirit of the brave departed physique, your strength is greatly reduced. Even dealing with a faceless one requires a sneak attack. You simply cannot afford to have too high of an expectation. So, instead of disappointing your followers, it's better to appear as the daughter of the Night King and lower their expectations. That way, even if you're lacking compared to the Night King, people will still understand you, support you, and love you because you're the daughter of the Night King. Aya was stunned for a moment. Is that so? I seem to understand what you mean. Speaking of which, my feelings are really complicated. I've returned to my homeland, and yet I have to play the role of my own daughter. Wang Lu smiled and said, speaking of which, I'm friends with the Night King. Shouldn't you consider calling me uncle in the future? If you seek death, you will die, Wang Lu. However, Aya was not interested in arguing with Wang Lu over this verbal battle. It was almost time for her to take a break, and it was time for her to shoulder her responsibilities. After ending their conversation in the sky, Wang Lu, Aya, and Bedivere, the 3 of them, did not immediately land because the battle in Dragon City was not over. Although on the battlefield, the situation has been completely reversed. After losing Faceless One, Holy Light Religion was like a group of dragons without a leader, their morale was in chaos. In particular, the Archons who were responsible for the battlefield command stopped operating, which made the morale of the Holy Light Religion army even more chaotic. The priests and holy knights were at a loss, scurrying around the battlefield like headless flies. At the same time, the death of Faceless One, moreover, he was beheaded by Aya in front of everyone, which was a fatal blow to the morale of the Holy Light Religion. Looking down from above, they could clearly see the hesitation and fear in the eyes of the Holy Light Religion believers. Even the almost omnipotent Faceless One was beheaded by the Dragon City guards, who knew how many cards they were hiding. And once a new situation occurred, who else could lead them out of the predicament? For decades, the Holy Light Religion in Dragon City mostly relied on the Archbishop Rowan. Later on, Faceless One appeared and suppressed everything with an absolutely strong stance. However, now that Faceless One was dead and the Archbishop defected, the Holy Light Religion believers were suddenly at a loss. However, although Holy Light religion suffered a fatal blow, they, after all, still occupied an absolute numerical advantage. Previously, in the last defensive circle, the Dragon City Guards suffered a heavy loss, which further widened the gap between them and the Holy Light religion. Now, it was nearly 6 or 7 times. In this case, a little carelessness might lead to a capsized ship in the gutter. Not to mention that just now, the sudden appearance of the Caliban and the killing of Faceless One by Aya were also a great shock to the Dragon City Guards, which also dispersed their fighting spirit. And now, what she had to do was to regroup the Dragon City Guards and completely establish the victory. Feeling that her body has slightly recovered her strength, Aya struggled to break free from the embrace of Wang Lu and stood in the air relying on her own strength. Her eyes swept the ground, looking valiant and formidable, which complemented the splendor of the Caliban. With a new identity, Aya actually had a lot to say, but at this moment, there was no time for a long speech. Fortunately, as a former ruler, she was very clear about how to effectively use her time. I am the daughter of the Night King, the legitimate successor of Bretonia. In the name of the Caliban, defeat the enemy in front of me and pick the fruit of victory. With that, Aya waved the Caliban, and the golden light pointed straight ahead. It was a simple action, but it seemed to contain an incredible magic. Looking at the direction where Aya's sword was pointing, a strong surge of excitement surged in the heart of every Bretonia person. It was a memory that came from the depths of their bloodline. In a trance, people seemed to see rows of knights in shining silver armor riding on spirited horses. They held long swords that were polished to the point of not even a speck of dust could be seen in their hands, and sharp dragon spears were fixed on their saddles. In front of them, there were 10 times and 100 times more enemies, like a black tide. However, the knights looked solemn, and their fighting spirit was unwavering. And in front of the knights, a flawless knight waved his sword high, pointing straight ahead. Knights, charge! After 100 years, that battle cry once again exploded in their ears. The Dragon City Guards only felt that in their exhausted bodies, their limbs and bones gave birth to infinite strength. Following the direction of the stone sword, they began to run, began to charge. Respond to the call of the king, defeat all enemies that stood in their way. In a trance, the once world-shaking night charge once again appeared in the world. Dragon City Guards turned into a sharp knife, deeply piercing into the Holy Light religion's formation. The final battle finally began, but the result of the battle was already clear at a glance. At the forefront of the battlefield, Lu Li, Bai Shixian, and Quan Zhouhua separately pierced into the enemy's formation, quickly harvesting lives with their own means. 36, 37, 38, Lu Li simultaneously controlled more than 10 flying swords, shuttling back and forth on the battlefield like a gust of lightning. Wherever she went, it was like a sickle cutting wheat, taking away a piece of life. The girl also muttered something, carefully counting her own achievements, for fear of making a mistake. And beside her, there was a reign of terror. In fact, when Aya waved the Caliban, launching the night charge after 100 years, the outcome of this war has already been determined. There was no need for the several people to deliberately do anything. The Dragon City Guards with boiling morale were enough to tear the enemy into pieces. However, Lu Li did not forget Wang Lu's entrustment. They were still carrying a difficult task, to collect 999 roses watered with the blood of middle-order professions of Holy Light religion. And this Dragon City battle was the best opportunity to harvest them. In addition to Dragon City, there was no other place in the entire Bretonia that could gather nearly 1,000 middle-order professions. If they didn't kill them now, when would they? In terms of strength, Lu Li was not at the forefront in the Dragon City battlefield. However, in terms of the ability to kill in a chaotic battle, few could compare to her. The Holy Light religion's morale completely collapsed under the successive blows. They scattered in all directions, without any resistance. Lu Li's high explosive and high mobility advantage was immediately brought into full play. In a moment, Lu Li almost killed her way through the Holy Light Religion's formation. More than 40 middle-order professions died under her sword. As for the rest of the low-order professions, they were countless. However, the girl just stood there for a moment, adjusted her breathing, and then once again turned into a rainbow light and began a new round of killing. According to her senior brother, this battle was the best opportunity to increase her achievement. Once she missed it, she didn't know when there would be a second time. Although the specific explanation was somewhat incomprehensible, Lu Li at least remembered the most critical point. If you kill 100 people, I will let you eat all the delicacies in Bretonia. With this sentence, Lu Li had endless motivation to act. In her eyes, the ones who were fleeing in panic were not the priests, holy knights, or the inquisitors, but the fragrant and delicious finger-sucking chicken. Well, that's a good mentality. While Lu Li was flying on her flying sword, a strange voice suddenly rang in her ears. While killing, your heart can actually be so calm. Is this the special mind cultivation technique of you 9 regions people? Lu Li looked around in surprise but didn't find the speaker. However, feeling that there was no hostility in the voice, she seriously replied, I don't understand what you're talking about. The voice laughed and then asked, do you know that you're killing people? I know, it's obvious. Senior brother said that if I kill 100 people, I'll get a reward. Ha ha ha, so for you, killing is just a game? The voice said, do you know that each of the dead under your sword is a living being? They have their own life, their own ideals, and their own loved ones. You see the priest with short red hair at the rear left. His name is Kyle, 25 years old this year. He is a talented priest from the countryside. He came to the big city to do odd jobs for the high-order priest in order to accumulate wealth as soon as possible. Because in his hometown, he has a woman that he has been secretly in love with for many years. He planned to propose to her after this battle. The girl actually likes him and has been looking forward to his return. She vowed that the two of them would get married and have children, and live together until their hair turns white. Unfortunately, because of your sword strike just now, all of this is impossible. Oh. Lu Li let out an oh sound and continued to look for the next target. That girl with long brown hair, Li, is the lead singer of the church choir. She is very beautiful, and her voice is very pleasant to hear. Although her character is somewhat vain and delicate, she's actually a devout and kind girl. Every rest day, she would carefully take care of the stray cats outside the church, and then watch the believers who come to the church to worship. She actually likes a talented bard. Although the latter is only a civilian, his singing always intoxicated her. The development of the relationship between these two people is destined to be bumpy, but also destined to be touching. Unfortunately, all of this has been ended by you. People will never be able to appreciate Li's singing again, and the bard will never know that there is a beautiful girl who secretly likes him. The soft voice cleverly changed its tone, enticing Lu Li to involuntarily immerse herself in the story, to appreciate the sadness of the story, to involuntarily surge with remorse and other emotions. Lu Li was indeed somewhat immersed in it. Her killing action became slower and slower, and eventually, she simply stopped, with a puzzled expression on her face. That being the case, Lu Li puzzledly asked, why would Holy Light Religion let them join the battlefield? Isn't it cruel? Lu Li said, somewhat annoyed. I understand. You want to tell me that Holy Light Religion is cruel and inhumane, that they have no bottom line and have harmed many people's lives, right? Very well, I will kill these Holy Light Religion believers to avenge the dead people. That voice exclaimed, wait a minute, don't you think your logic is a bit strange? Lu Li, on the other hand, turned into a ray of light and left. Chapter 321. The war continued until nightfall before it finally came to an end. Unsurprisingly, Dragon City guards won a complete victory. Since Faceless One was beheaded by Aya, the war actually turned into a one-sided massacre. The Holy Light believers were completely routed, scattering from the center of the military camp area. Dragon City guards, under the guidance of the Caliban, pursued them all the way. Wrapped in the previous resentment in their heart, they didn't let anyone escape. Finally, they chased them for hundreds of miles outside the city before they gradually stopped. At this point, most of the Holy Light believers who participated in the war were dead. The elites that Holy Light religion accumulated in Bretonia for hundreds of years were gone. The city was covered with rivers of blood. The originally neat and tidy streets were now covered with blood, and everywhere were the bodies of priests in holy robes. At the same time, the fierce fighting would inevitably hurt some innocent people. Not all the civilians were evacuated from the city. There were always some who suffered undeserved disasters. For a time, the smell of blood assailed the nostrils in Dragon City, and the sound of crying shook the sky. The nature of war was cruel. No one was surprised by this scene, because if the winner of this war was Holy Light religion, they would not be lenient to Dragon City guards, and would certainly set off a great purge. Therefore, even though many people could not bear to see this massacre, they were inconvenient to say anything. For example, the former Archbishop Rowan, who was in a very awkward situation, fell into a deep contradiction. As a former archbishop, he belonged to the church camp, but later on, his identity as a member of the Priory of Zion was revealed, and thus became the sworn enemy of Holy Light religion. In line with the principle that the enemy is a friend, in the final stage of the massacre, Dragon City guards never aimed at Rowan. Of course, this was also related to Luo Wan's good karma with the Dragon City guards for decades. In the entire city, Luo Wan's reputation was very good. Even the Dragon City guards were not willing to lay their hands on such an old man. However, for Rowan himself, it was difficult to accept this leniency, because too many people died. As the regional archbishop, Rowan has always regarded the believers of Dragon City as his own children. But now, these children have all become corpses. Did they do something wrong? No, because they never had a choice. When Faceless One's tyrannical power was monstrous, they could not be expected to resist directly. And when the war began, everyone was helpless. They did nothing wrong, yet they died a violent death. And could this be said to be the fault of the Dragon City guards? Obviously not. Compared to the Holy Light believers, they were actually more innocent. The Holy Sword of Judgment fell from the sky, and then the Holy Light religion army surrounded the general barracks. From the beginning to the end, did the Dragon City guards have a choice? Faceless One was naturally the main culprit, and he, as the archbishop, failed to protect everyone, which was also a great dereliction of duty. What right did he have to continue living after such a dereliction of duty? In fact, Archbishop Rowan once thought of suicide. Although the doctrine of Holy Light religion strictly forbade this kind of behavior, in desperation, he had no choice. However, a certain young man who claimed to be the spokesperson of the Saints found him and made him give up on the idea with just one sentence. Your life is no longer your own. If you feel guilty, then use your dying years to atone for your sins with practical actions. Death is just an escape. Only by living on bravely can one better face the dead. Luo Wan sighed and finally had nothing to say. In addition to Rowan, everyone needed to face the rest of their lives bravely. After a fierce battle, both sides could be said to be mutually wounded. Although Dragon City guards won, their loss was not much better than that of Holy Light religion. Only half of the people survived, and many of them had lost their fighting ability forever. However, the entire Dragon City also suffered a huge loss. In the final stage of the war, countless buildings were destroyed, many Holy Light believers took advantage of the danger to defend themselves, and the response of Dragon City guards was to directly demolish the buildings along with the people. In the process, it was inevitable that civilians were injured. That night, Bedivere floated in the air, silently overlooking his city. Although today's Dragon City had not yet fallen into ruins, but the work of the last few decades seemed to have been done in vain. But, in the end, we won. Bedivere closed his eyes. This is a dreamlike victory. I never even thought about what to do next after this victory. Ha ha ha. A hearty laughter sounded beside Bedivere. The next step is, of course, to continue to win until Bretonia is reunified and Holy Light religion is completely expelled. After half a day of calming himself down, Bedivere has developed a high immunity to such bold words. Not to mention that the person who spoke was not the monarch that he was determined to serve, but a mysterious 9 regions cultivator. Therefore, Bedivere didn't show too much respect. It's easy to say, but Holy Light religion will not easily give up. The next battle may break out at any time, and we only have a weary army. Looking around, we don't even have a single ally. This battle was indeed a miraculous victory, but the next situation was even more dangerous. The Church has suffered a heavy loss that has never been seen in thousands of years, so how could they be willing to give up? Even if at this time they were in dire straits with the eastern city-states, they would certainly allocate their energy to deal with the rebellion in Dragon City. Compared to the ruins of Dragon City, which had almost no fighting power, Holy Light religion had much more abundant resources. After 100 years of operation, most of the forces in Bretonia have a connection with Holy Light religion. As long as they promised enough benefits, with the prestige and credibility of the #1 church in the continent, naturally, there would be people willing to be their pawn. Merely these jackals and wolves that might become the church's lackeys made Bedivere not dare to take them lightly. Moreover, Dragon City was too rich. Whether it was the equipment and ancient books for professions, or the gold and silver for ordinary people, Dragon City's accumulation was far beyond the reach of other cities. Now that both sides had suffered in the war, it was simply a naked temptation. Right now, if we are even a little bit careless, we will be attacked by a group, and we haven't even dealt with our own affairs. After a fierce battle, in addition to silently licking their wounds, Dragon City also had to face a critical problem: morale. In the previous day's fierce battle, Dragon City guards were basically united. Except for a few people who were coerced by Holy Light religion into defecting, most of them burst out with amazing cohesion. However, that was an instinctive response to seek self-preservation in a disaster. When the war was over and the crisis was lifted, the contradiction would inevitably be exposed. People could see the dangerous situation that Dragon City was facing. Right now, Dragon City guards could be said to have escaped from the jaws of death, but no one wanted to die again. Today's battle has repaid the favor of Dragon City for nurturing us. Next, do we need to continue to tie ourselves to Dragon City and wait for death? Yes, I just went out of the city to investigate, and there are already troops from other cities slowly gathering. Seriously, I don't think we can fight anymore. Such a voice quickly spread inside Dragon City, shaking the morale of the army. At the same time, for the ordinary people of Dragon City, this was also a restless night. Inside the city, the bloodstains had yet to disappear, and the murderous aura of Dragon City guards was still there. In the Cathedral of Holy Light religion, the light was dim. Outside the city, no one knew how many forces were eyeing them. Although the war was over, it could break out again at any time. The air inside the city was filled with a palpitating smell. And at this time, someone needed to come forward to stabilize the people's heart and suppress the situation. Aya stood on the square in the center of Dragon City. Under her feet, there was a tower that was pulled out of thin air by a spell, which allowed her to look down and have a panoramic view of the whole city. The bleak atmosphere inside Dragon City was also clear at a glance. In this regard, Aya just faintly opened her mouth, but her voice resounded inside and outside Dragon City. 150 years ago, it was also here that my father once led his own army to prepare for the final battle that was about to come. His opponent is the largest and last great lord of Bretonia. The savage lord has done many evil deeds, and the people are boiling with resentment. However, he colluded with foreign races, his power is monstrous, and his army is at its peak. But my father's army has just experienced 3 fierce battles, suffered heavy losses, and has become a weary army. The clear and piercingly cold voice was like the cold wind at night, which made people forget their troubles and focus their attention on the voice on the high platform, listening to the young girl's speech. At this time, people already knew the identity of the blonde girl, the daughter of the legendary Night King who died more than 100 years ago. Holding the stone sword, inheriting the will of the late king, the successor of Bretonia's royal power. These dazzling titles could not really appease people's hearts. In the face of an imminent crisis, the gradually forgotten king seemed pale and powerless. After all, she was just a seemingly fragile little girl. Moreover, shortly after killing Faceless One, she fell into a deep sleep. Then, the little girl finally woke up. Was she going to speak in front of everyone? Although this was not a good time to listen to the story, when Aya opened her mouth, the Dragon City guards could not help but be interested. For most of them, the Night King's 12 battles to unify Bretonia was just a sentence in the story, and the specific content was not clear to them. And in people's cognition, the invincible Night King naturally advanced triumphantly all the way, with no enemy under his command. However, at this time, before the last battle, the Night King seemed to be in a desperate situation. In fact, the situation 150 years ago was indeed desperate. At that time, the Night King won 3 consecutive fierce battles to subdue Dragon City and led the army to rest in the city. At this time, the Savage Lord, who had always been entrenched in a corner of Bretonia, took advantage of the situation and proposed the condition of dividing the world equally. If the Night King did not agree, the Savage Lord's army would submerge Dragon City and eliminate the Night King. At that time, the number of available soldiers of the Night King was nearly 10 times that of the opponent. On the high platform, Aya was neither happy nor sad, narrating her own story from another perspective. That night, his camp was also filled with all kinds of voices. The spies of the desolate overlord who had infiltrated the camp were spreading fear. The soldiers who had followed blindly were panicking and at a loss. The hearts of the veterans who had been through many battles were shaken. Dragon City, which had just surrendered, was watching coldly from the sidelines. Even the Knights of the Round Table began to argue endlessly. Illicit relations, retreat, temporarily avoid the sharp edge, as if there was a bottomless abyss in front of them that they could not advance even an inch. Hearing this, many people felt the same way and began to talk about it. Because if it was them, if they knew that the opponent had 10 times the number of troops, they would also hesitate and fear, just like, now. In the face of an evenly matched opponent, one bravely moved forward, that was courage. If it was 2 or 3 times, it would be suspected of being reckless, but if it was more than 10 times, it was simply seeking one's own death. So how did the Night King solve the problem at that time? 10 times the number of enemies. Could it be that he used some means to delay the time and recuperate before pressing forward with his army? Although people were also very clear that with the Night King's character, he would never easily compromise with the enemy, let alone the Savage Lord who believed in evil and killed countless people, but what else could he do if he did not compromise? If the situation at that time was really as bad as Aya said, there would be no chance of winning in a frontal battle. Unconsciously, people were deeply attracted by Aya's short story and began to be immersed in it. Perhaps, this story was really too immersive. Looking at the countless pairs of vacant eyes under the high platform, Aya gently raised her head to hide her eyes filled with emotion. 150 years had passed, but everything seemed to have happened yesterday. The situation was exactly the same. After restraining the agitation in her heart, Aya slowly opened her mouth. Her voice carried a faint majesty that made people's hearts palpitate. Who are we? Are we stray dogs? Or are we scavenging vultures? Are we the cockroaches lurking in the sewers? Or are we the stooped mice in the dark? No, we are the proud lions, the warriors blessed by the Breton dragon clan, the Bretonia knights that will always stand in the land of glory. Our principles are unity, courage, unbending, and unwavering uprightness. We will never negotiate with the demons, and will never bow to the savage lord. Because if we abandon our code, we will betray all the friends who bless us and protect us. We will betray the comrades who paved the road to victory with their lives in the past war. Because we have promised them, and even promised ourselves, that we will always face forward, bravely move forward, even if there is a bottomless abyss under our feet. But, my knights, do not be timid, do not despair, because under our feet is the glorious road to victory. We are the chosen masters of Bretonia. The brilliance of the Caliban guides us forward. The earth is our shield, the sky is our armor, and the wind, rain, and thunder are our weapons. Knights, cross the abyss, and ahead is the endless smooth road. In Dragon City, Aya's cry continued to reverberate. As time went by, in the silence, it gradually turned into a low buzzing sound, stirring people's hearts. Even if the story has passed for 150 years, and today's Dragon City guards were not the faithful knights under the Night King, similar feelings continued to surge from the bottom of people's hearts. As the people of Bretonia, there would always be similar elements flowing in their blood. That was the thirst for glory. Once upon a time, the development of holy light religion in Bretonia was in full swing. A large number of foreign priests and holy knights poured in to abuse their power, yet they still received the forbearance of the people of Bretonia. After the Night King left, the people subconsciously wanted to find something to fill the void. However, it was not until this time that people found out that although holy light religion was more powerful, larger in scale, and also had its own light, but compared to the shining light of the Night King, it was nothing. The spirit of disregarding everything for the code in their heart was the glory that they truly yearned for. For this, they did not hesitate to die. Of course, 150 years later, even if people were not familiar with the history, they knew that the result of that battle was the victory of the Night King. The heroic sacrifice of the knights was not in vain, in exchange for an unprecedented high degree of unity in Bretonia. However, people were still impatient to hear Aya's story. In that battle, my father took the lead. The Caliban crushed the 8 great witch doctors of the savage tribe and beheaded the savage lord. The morale of the Knights of the Round Table was like a rainbow as they broke through the enemy's formation with irresistible force. The battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The knights burned their life and soul to persist until the last moment, killing the enemy that was 10 times their number. 3 days later, the whole army cheered heartily to celebrate the victory. Under the high platform, there were countless pairs of shining eyes. Standing on the high platform, Aya has clearly felt that the city seemed to be ignited with a raging flame. Therefore, she held up the Caliban, and a golden beam of light soared into the sky, illuminating the Dragon City as if it was daytime. 150 years ago, my father used the Caliban to cut through the endless darkness and despair, establishing an unprecedented feat in Bretonia. Today, the Caliban is still guiding us on the road to victory. At this moment, I can clearly hear the cry of the Caliban. Victory is in front, and will always be in front. The darkness around us is not our destination, the last bit of afterglow in the city is not our destination. Our destination is only to go all the way forward, cutting our way through the thistles and thorns, cutting our way to the light. Some people ask, what is in front? What are we going to fight for? The warriors of 150 years ago, even in the deepest and most desperate situation, still have a clear and firm belief. They believe in the spirit of chivalry, believe that Bretonia will definitely move toward unification and prosperity. And now, in the face of the fragmented country, in the face of the aggressive invasion of holy light religion, I want to say, this is the abyss that we have to cross, this is the powerful enemy that we are about to face. I am the daughter of the Night King, and my heart adheres to the same belief as the previous Night King. I firmly believe that this land is the land of Bretonia, the land of chivalry. Aya's voice was like a gale, like a tsunami. Her impassioned emotion swept through everyone's heart. In the name of the Caliban, I declare that the war for the restoration of Bretonia begins here. Anything that stands in the way of this road will be crushed. We will step on the ladder of victory to reach the shore of eternal glory. Long live Bretonia! Long live Bretonia! You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.